The Planning and Zoning Commission, and I hereby call to order the October 29th, 2020 public hearing of the City of Prescott Planning Commission. I will have each member of the commission introduce themselves. We start off with Stan.
Good morning, Stan Goligoski.
Good morning, Greg Lozelle.
Good morning, Tom Hutchison.
Good morning, Ted Gambogi.
Butch Tracy.
Good morning, George Lee.
Attending from the City Council, we have Phil Good, Steve Siska, and Kathy. Yep, I thought of sorry back to Kathy Rusing. Okay, I think, did I catch everybody? Members of the staff will introduce themselves when they make a presentation or discuss. This is an open public hearing and is being tape recorded and videotaped by the city. The proceedings are being televised by representatives of the public media, the public, local cable and or radio stations, and may also be rebroadcast. The number of commissioners present is 7. It will require 4 votes for a majority. Some of the individuals may be attending this meeting remotely, all parties wishing to be heard, including commission members, are required to state their name prior to speaking in order to ensure accurate minutes. Members of the public, when called upon, are required to state their name and address for the record so that we may know who is speaking and be able to contact them at a later date if necessary. Could you also check your cell phones and make sure they're on mute or off during the meeting here too? Before we start the meeting, since we have an item on the agenda that has a lot of public interest, I want to adopt the procedures that the City Council uses. And to speak, you need to be recognized on it. Commission members want to speak, just notify me. Members of the public who want to speak, there's a cards are back there, and you give them to Kaylee. Kaylee will call them off. Members on Zoom, there is an icon that you can click to indicate that you want to speak on that. Our order of business here, for those who this is their first time attending, the staff will make a presentation. Commission members will ask questions. The applicant will make a presentation. Commission members will ask questions. The public attending can make presentations to that. They will be limited to 3 minutes. There is a little device at the stand up here that will have green for go, yellow, you got 30 seconds, and red, you're in deep trouble, okay? And this will also apply to those on Zoom too. Any questions on that? Okay, our first item on the agenda is the minutes of the October 8th, 2020 meeting. Can we get a beat from somewhere?
Because my hardware scan is complete with no issues.
We are so happy to hear that.
You said cell phones, not computers. You have not violated your first admonition.
Eleanor, I missed you there. Sorry about that in the introduction there. We have Councilmember Orr here too. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Is there a motion concerning the minutes?
See again?
Is there a motion concerning the minutes for acceptance or rejection?
Yeah, I'll make a motion, Tom Hutchison here. I'll make a motion to approve these minutes.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second, Greg Lozelle.
Okay, we have a motion, second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The next item on the agenda, and the only item on the agenda, is SUP 20-01, special use permit to allow for the construction of a 55-foot wireless tower camouflaged as an elm tree and on an 8-foot tall CMU wall equipment enclosure, which includes a request to exceed the allowed height limitation for the zoning district of 35 feet. Location is 4044 Bar Circle A Road. Zoning is multifamily, medium density. Owner is Yavapai Hills Developers LLC. Applicant is Pinnacle Consulting, Inc. And this is site APN 103-19-253. Tammy.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman, members of the Commission. Tammy DeWitt, Community Planner with the City of Prescott. The subject property is located in the Yavapai Hills subdivision. This area is zoned multifamily medium, and it was platted as a planned area development. The site in question, this half of the property is owned by Yavapai Hills LLC, and this half, the other side of the tank, is owned by the city. This is a city water tank. It's about 1.5 million gallons. And the area has developed after the water tank was put in. So we do have most of the area just surrounding the water tank has been developed, and there are still a few vacant parcels. On the site, there are other infrastructure. There's a public safety communication tower. There's also a telemetry antenna for the water tank. And these were provided by Mr. Gambochi. Thank you for taking these. Walked around the property more than I did. Then down here, we have the equipment building for the public safety communication tower. And then this is the water tank up there. It's about 1.5 million gallons on the site. So here's a site plan of the property that shows this is the water tank and this is the property. And then this is the lease area where the proposed telecommunication facility will be placed. This is their lease area, and it shows where the facility, the tower will go, and then also the equipment. It will be surrounded by 8-foot CMU wall, which is pretty standard for these to keep people out and protect the equipment, and try to help with noise buffering too for the neighbors. So this is the existing site here on the left with the existing water tank. And this is what the proposed tower will look like. It is a 50-foot tower, and we have 5 feet of foliage. So per the land development code, any facility that's over the height allowance for the zoning district, which for this zoning district is 35 feet, it does require an SUP to be approved by the city council through the SUP process. And part of that SUP process is it comes through the Planning and Zoning Commission. So here are some renderings that was provided by the applicant, which is required as part of their application, the photo sims. This is showing what the proposed tower will look like approximately. This is from Bar Circle Road down here. And these were included in your packet too. And then this is also from Bar Circle Road looking up at the facility. Per state statutes for an SUP, we are required to notify all the property owners within 300 feet. So this is the buffer for 300 feet. For this application, we wanted to make sure that we got adequate notice out for this. We started this application about in March. We sent out notices for a neighborhood meeting, which staff facilitated. We did it via Zoom at the time because of what was happening at the time. And we sent notices out to 1,300 feet, I believe, at that time. And then we expanded it out to 200 feet to try to catch more people down in the lower areas. So this meeting was the property owners within 1,500 feet of the site were notified about this meeting. And was notified about the second neighborhood meeting that the applicants did. So neighborhood comment that we've got a number of nearby property owners that provided comments, which were provided in your packets. Most of those comments touched on the impact reduced property values, failure to locate better alternative sites, concern for RF emissions, reduction of setbacks, which in this case, the tower itself needs a 50-foot setback, and the pool height. So a breakdown of all the opposition, we got 226 signatures on the petition and 55 letters total. In total, the opposition submitted represents 162 properties, of which 147 are within or adjacent to the Yavapai Hills development. Staff also received 4 letters of support. Of those 4 letters, 2 of them also signed opposition too. So And I have those mapped out for you. And also the ranch at Prescott HOA sent a letter that the letter represented the ranch at Prescott Unit 9 Mystic Heights, which has 54 lots. So here's a map of the area. We did the red dots are all the opposition within this area. We have a letter of support here. We have this property and this property here that did support and opposition. This is the location of the tank. And this is the ranch Unit 9 Mystic Heights subdivision, just so you have a point of reference for that. And then this right here, this line, which is in the dark color, this is the boundary between the city and the county. And this area is Diamond Valley, that's in the county. Just to kind of give you a point of reference. And this is 69 here, down here, and this is Prescott Lakes Parkway. So the question is, what authority does the city have to regulate cell towers? You kind of heard this before from previous presentations by our city attorney. There are limitations on the city's ability to regulate cell towers. Local jurisdictions' regulation on cell towers cannot prohibit or have the effect of prohibiting the provisions of personal wireless services. This means a local jurisdiction cannot deny a cell tower application if the proposed cell tower is the least intrusive means to cover a significant gap in personal wireless service. Other requirements of the city cannot discriminate, prohibit, or have effect of prohibiting personal wireless service. The city must act within a reasonable period of time, the shot clock. We are beyond our shot clock. This was submitted in January, but the applicants have been working with us to, because of the COVID and the delays that we've had and the amount of opposition, have been working with us to, and we're keeping this application going forward as much as we can. The city cannot deny on the basis of environmental effects of radio frequency emissions, and denial of application must be in writing and supported by substantial evidence. But the applicant must show that the proposed cell tower closes a significant gap in its own coverage in the least intrusive way possible. A meaningful comparison of various sites, that the proposed site is the best available to address the coverage gap, that the proposed site is the best technologically feasible site, and that the application complies with the city's land development code and ordinances. The applicant must show a lack of available and technologically feasible alternatives to its proposed cell tower, and it is appropriate to ask applicant to study alternative sites, alternative designs, and alternative technologies, which the applicant did provide you with many studies that they've done about the site and more recent studies that they've done too. So exemptions to our code for cell towers, we just wanted to make sure you were aware of this. Towers, antennas, and wireless communication and related facilities that are exempt from the requirements of this section, which is our telecommunications section of the code. Those not exceeding the maximum height and setback requirements of the underlying zoning district and used solely for the transmissions by a single user and not otherwise restricted within that zone, including but not limited to amateur radio and devices necessary for the use of subscription to a commercial wireless provider service, and that are owned, operated, and controlled by a government entity. So those are exempt from these sections of the code. If this was a 35-foot tower, if that's allowed in that zoning district, it wouldn't have to be stealth and it wouldn't have to be co-locatable. So the one proposed in front of you, it is stealth as a tree. It is co-locatable. That means another carrier can come and get a building permit to put their tower if it's approved. So it does meet those requirements. So in conclusion, the SUP process allows for council approval of tower heights in excess of the district allowance. In this instance, the MFM district has a height limit of 35 feet. The requested 50-foot pole and the 5 foot of foliage would require specific council approval as part of the SUP approval. So recommended action, whether you either move to approve this with or without modifications of SUP 20, a special use permit to allow for a 55-foot cell tower camouflage as an elm tree. And that concludes my presentation. I'm free to answer questions. Our applicants are participating via Zoom, and they also have a presentation for you.
Thank you, Tammy. Any questions for Tammy?
Tammy, Tom Hutchison here. just for clarification, what's in front of us today is really two things. The first being the approval of a special use permit to site a cell tower, period. In that case, 35 feet. And the second piece of this is this 20-foot variance from 35 feet to 55 feet.
Actually, there's only one request in front of you. The only request in front of you is a special use permit to allow for a 55-foot cell tower camouflaged as an elm tree.
That's one thing.
That's the only request in front of you. The siting of the tower is not being placed in front of you.
If I look at the chart and the land use guide, it says that you can put a cell tower on something zoned multifamily medium with a special use permit.
If they exceed the height requirement. So this use permit,
So
the
that's the first
special use,
piece.
that's the only request in front of you is a special use permit to allow for a 55-foot cell tower camouflage as a tree. That is the request in front of you and what you're,
So it's basically all or nothing.
or you can make a modification to it.
Is that clear to everybody?
Greg, did you have a?
That cleared up for me, thank you.
Anybody else have a question? Tammy? I have one, Tammy. How does the height of this tower compare to other cell towers in the city of Prescott? Do you know? Or am I catching you off guard?
No, this is the second shortest. So if I remember right, when we did the analysis of it, was that all the other ones are taller. Yeah, the shortest is 35 feet. So this would be the second shortest.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of staff?
I do have one more
Yes,
question.
Greg.
Elm trees, are there other elm trees around there?
No,
Just for the record on that, Tom, again, there are elm trees in Prescott, Siberian elm trees. And essentially they have about 3/4 of the width to height. So basically, if it's 55 feet, you need a 35-foot wide bush, so to speak, to look like a real elm tree.
this
This doesn't do that.
it's a design rather than a pine tree, which maybe there's no pine trees around there either. So this is an alternative that some of the cell companies have brought forward for sites that maybe will be more compatible to the area. If they're a broadleaf kind of tree is what they kind of call them before. I've seen them called just a broadleaf tree. But they are a camouflage tree, which meets the requirements of being stealth.
My point is, this doesn't look like an elm tree.
Right, it does not.
Okay, so if it's a tree, fine, but an elm tree, I don't think so.
Any other questions from staff? Why don't we go ahead and have the applicant present? And after the applicant presents, we'll be asking questions of the applicant, and then it'll be open for the attendees here.
Dina, you're muted. Hello? Are you there?
Tammy, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Okay. Sorry, we seem to have a double mute on there.
I asked for the, or I can go through the presentation for you.
It should be requesting.
You got it.
Okay.
marvels of technology.
You guys should have control of it now.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Michelle Lamoureux. I'm with Pinnacle Consulting. My address is 1426 North Marvin Street, Gilbert, Arizona, 852331. I appreciate you taking the time this morning. It's cold up there. Today, you have the unenviable task of, balancing our request with the neighbors' views of what they want to see in your neighborhood. So hopefully, we can get through the facts for you and you can make an informed decision. So we are proposing a new wireless facility located at 4044 Bar A Circle Road. This will be a 55-foot mono elm. One of the reasons that we chose a mono elm, and terminology is what it is, but essentially for a long time, the only camouflage option that we had at our disposal was some sort of a pine tree. So we had contacted Larson Camouflage, which is based out of Tucson, and had worked extensively with them. A lot of the cell tower companies did, to see if we could come up with something that was better than a pine tree. So, a lot of the complaints about the pine trees was that they didn't really look like a pine tree, whether that was color or shape. So what they came up with is what they called a mono elm, that is an elm that is native to Arizona. So while it might not be perfectly a true elm, it is a broadleaf type tree where it can be bushier at the top, which is where the antennas are, to camouflage the antennas better than a typical pine tree, which is bushier at the bottom, and that's not where the antennas are. So that was our goal in proposing an elm over a pine tree, is the fact to conceal the antennas and help it to blend in with the surrounding area as much as possible. So obviously, if the council decides that they would choose to have us do a pine over an elm, we are certainly open to that as well. This project shall include a 25 by 30 compound, enclosed by an 8-foot CMU wall. The ground equipments will be enclosed in that 8-foot wall. And the antennas will be camouflaged as well with, they're called socks. And so those will have leaves on them as well. This is a co-locatable site. One of the reasons that we are requesting it to be 50 feet is so that if an additional carrier comes out, instead of building another site or requesting another site in the area, they can co-locate on this particular site. Apologies, my mouse seems to have a mind of its own. So this is just an overview of the project and where we are proposing to put the tree. And this is just another view of it. In this view, there is the existing tower here with the Omni antenna on it. So this will be a 3-sector array with 2 antennas per sector. So we do have our RF engineer here as well, and I will let him, get into more detail on how this project covers the significant gap in coverage by eliminating the current capacity problems that the network is currently experiencing. We do believe that this proposed project as designed is the least intrusive means. And due to that is we do understand that this is in a neighborhood. However, currently on this parcel, you have a water tower, you have the United States Forest Service weather tower, you have an equipment building. So you have other commercial equipment in this area. There is a significant need in this area, and what we are proposing, we are trying to blend in with the area, but do it in an area that already has commercial things on it. This area indeed does need service. So this site is designed to accommodate additional carriers should it be needed in the future. And the reality of it is, and I think we've all experienced it even more during the times that we're currently living in, is that having access to quality wireless service, it's not a luxury, it's a necessity. Many of us are working from our homes now and doing Zoom meetings, doing calls. Having service is vital to not only what we do, but also our livelihoods. Obviously, there are numerous benefits to improve coverage and capacity from a new wireless infrastructure. Today, the FCC Commission estimates that more than 80% of 911 calls are placed from their cell phones. So, put yourself in somebody's shoes who's in an emergency situation. You're trying to call 911 and you can't get a signal. So those are incredible moments of panic. First responders, they use their cell phone GPS, they use mobile laptops. When an ambulance responds to a call, typically one of the things that they pull out is their iPad, and they are transmitting information back to the hospital about what is occurring, so that when you arrive at the hospital, that information is ready and waiting. That doctor knows what they need to do when you arrive at those doors. Law enforcement, they rely heavily on wireless communications to protect and serve us. There are lots of communities, obviously, and well within their right to protest having a new site placed in their community. I can think of several areas that have protested us going into their neighborhoods. And one comes to mind specifically that this happened about 5 years ago. They didn't want the service. We were at the edge of their community at another water tank area. The council chose to go with the neighborhood. Within 2 years, we were getting calls every single day from the neighbors, because what ended up happening was that the service continued to degrade. And it got so bad that the police and fire people who lived in the neighborhood moved out of the area because they couldn't respond to any calls. There was a school for the blind in the area, and they were constantly calling us to, somehow try to up the signal to their school, because one of the things that when somebody becomes newly blind is there's an app that they actually can use on their phone that describes the surrounding area and relays information back to them. So, there's so many benefits to having good wireless service. Maybe another one that touches even closer to home for all of you on the council is that the Yarnell fires, part of that was that Verizon and AT&T, they were struggling to deploy enough temporary sites out to help the firefighters. And tragically, because of lack of communication and the fire overwhelming firefighters, people died. And these are all tragedies that we don't want to have happen. So, unfortunately, this is the reality we live in. We live in a society that has to deal with a lot of things that aren't good. So we do comply with all FAA, FCC, state and city regulations. The code for Prescott does require that if we can't meet the 35 feet, that the request is to do a SUP, which is what we have done. This is a 50 feet to top a tower with an additional 5 feet of branches above. We do meet the City of Prescott setback requirements. We do believe that the elm is the best design, but obviously if the council would request something else, we're open to that. Per City of Prescott code, we did notify police and fire. They are obviously in support of better coverage and improved service to better serve the citizens of Prescott. And currently this area does not provide adequate LTE 4G broadband coverage. I'll let Steve Kennedy, our RF engineer, get into the capacity problems, but at the end of the day, Verizon is here because there is a need. They certainly don't go out and build towers just for fun. And Tammy already showed you these photo sims, so I'll just quickly run through them. In closing, we did hold several neighborhood meetings because we understand that the neighborhood is in opposition of this. So even though the Town of Prescott's code did not require us, we did hold several meetings. We also hired a third party who is Valbridge Property Advisors, who's the largest independent commercial property valuation and advisory service firm in the United States. And they conducted a market study to determine the impact of residential property values as a result of wireless communication towers. And I believe Tammy did include this in your packet. So the study found that statistically, there's no significant impact, and the majority of property values in neighborhoods with cell towers are in line with the property values in areas without cell towers. So, at the end of the day, as Carl Finkelstein commented, everyone does expect excellent cell phone reception and they want the connectivity. So, there's only one way to do that, and that's actually to have the towers. So if anybody has any questions, I'm certainly happy to answer them. Otherwise, that concludes my presentation.
Any questions of Michelle?
Yeah, Tom Hutchison here, Dino. What I'm trying to get at here is why 55 feet? So bear with me. I mean, does that extra 20 feet solve the capacity problem? Does capacity equal height? Could you do this with a 35-foot tower?
Sure. So I think to best answer that question, I'll let Steve, I don't know if you want to do your presentation or if you want to just answer the question.
I think let me kind of do both. So
Okay.
I want to get into, I've got 3 presentations and I'll try to keep my time at a minimum. But Steve Kennedy, 11142 North 165th Drive, Suite 343, Surprise, Arizona 85388. I'm a consultant to Pinnacle Consulting, and I have performed RF engineering services. I have 32 years in the business. I'm not sure, Tammy, would you allow me to share my screen, or am I already allowed?
Right now,
I'm sorry, I'm hearing impaired. Can you give me a simple yes or no answer on that?
So why'd go higher? One is to be able to see the area you're trying to surround, much like in the commission's room when you guys are at a higher chair, you're able to see the audience able to see you. So one, we have to get height above what's going on, height above terrain, height above things that are going around. The second reason is in order to follow with the city's requirement for multi-tenant towers or the ability to co-locate, the lower height has to have the ability to see surrounding areas as well. So in order to meet the requirement for multi-tenants, you have to be tall enough to handle both tenants. Does that answer your question, sir?
No, I was looking for a yes or no. Can you do it with 35 feet?
No.
No. Let me ask you this a different way then. How much of this height is for future use? Because you say in your workup here, that it's designed for, future capacity, future carriers. So if you eliminated that, could you get it done with 35 feet?
So if you want us to go down to one tower or one tenant on the tower, so it leaves open the possibility for a second tower, and lower the area, you still need to be able to see above everything. So for future capacity of the network, it wouldn't work. And then for future coverage, it wouldn't work. We need the higher height, sir. If you allow me to go through my RF engineering information, I can help to show you that information from the packets.
Yes,
You just,
please.
if you ask to share your screen.
Okay, let me attempt. Think it says you cannot start screen share while other participant is sharing. If, Michelle, if you can stop sharing, I guess, if you were.
I have a second question or third question, I guess.
Okay, there you go. Now you can do it.
All right, thank you.
All right.
You're fine. Okay, so I'm going to move to. So you had one more question, sir?
Go ahead and finish this.
Okay. All right. So I went up on October 6th and to show that there's a lack of coverage or there's a gap in service, I performed drive tests or quality field tests around the area. I took 49 data points within this area. I sat in my vehicle. I had a regular Android phone, just an Android phone, and it had some apps on it. One was the LTE Discovery app, which tells me what the service level or the signal level is in the area. Then I performed tests with using the speedtest.net application and the OpenSignal application. So I kind of wanted to see just from a real view, and this is service in a vehicle, not service in the houses, what's going on, because we had some people state, well, the coverage is fine, everything's great, we don't need anything else. And in some areas in this area, it is good, but predominantly a lot of the area around is not. So typical speeds, carriers have postings about expected speeds for the coverage on the website. Verizon typically wants to have, an upload speed between 2.2 and 5 megabits. And then, you're supposed to be able to get download speeds approaching 50 megabits. Verizon has a goal of 5 to 12 download and 2 to 5 upload. That's 4G LTE's target. So if we look and you look at the pins, those are the areas where I took readings. Some up to the north were some newer areas where houses were being built, some areas existing around the site, and then some areas to the east, southeast, and to the northeast. So anywhere you saw green, you had 20 megabits or above on download. Anything yellow was 10 to 20. Anything orange all the way down to red was down to 0.01 megabits per second, very low speeds. Black was where there was no connection. I could not get the phone to connect to the network. There was no ability for the application to make a download test. So that was speedtest.net download results. So you can see that up in the northern area, we're having some significant problems. And even in the southeastern area, we're seeing some very low speeds. I think I remember being close to the pool and having not a very good experience. So then I did OpenSignal, which I wanted to see, okay, different sets of servers. Let's try just a different application and see if we see the same thing. And we saw just a little bit worse with OpenSignal. And once again, to the southeast of where the proposed site is, as well as to the northeast, service levels were not that great. I mean, there was some here and there. You can see that over on the east side, there's the AZ2 Highway 69 site. That's active for Verizon, but it's the level of service it is able to provide because its height is very low. So the people within the valley or in the area around this site, they're having significantly negative results as far as download. Here's upload results. Upload was still the same kind of thing to the southeast and to the northwest. We didn't have a lot of really good speeds, had a lot of 0.01 to 5 megabit, 0.5 megabits downloads or upload results. And then once again on the northeast and the southeast, that's where we saw the greatest impact. And then the open signal upload results pretty much show the same thing, not as good a quality within the area. So there are areas within this suburban area that have good coverage. I don't dismiss that. I don't discount that. They are the areas up on top of the hill around where the existing water tank is. They're going to be able to see or get a decent signal from other sites because they're higher up in elevation. The lower elevation areas do not get as good a quality. So the results show the network's not able to consistently provide the levels of service needed for the subscribers. I noticed wide-ranging changes, like moving from one spot to the next, which was maybe 600 or 700 feet, and I got service great in one spot. In the other spot, I had good signal level, but I had horrible download speeds. It's just that's the capacity of the network. Everybody's working on a shared channel, so it's really adaptive, and the area is significantly overloaded. So once again, while there's some good service, there's some not so good service. And I think the not so good service is larger than the good service. I'll switch over next to the alternative site analysis. So opposition brought up, if I remember correctly, 6 locations that they wanted us to look at and review and say that these areas are, try going over here instead of going over at the existing site. So once again, the proposed site, I'm just restating what's already there. The alternative sites for you were the Costco parking lot, the mall parking lot. There was some land east of the Walmart. There was some land west of Lamb Chevrolet. Then there's the west side of Glassford Hill, and then the southern side of the Jeezy property. 5 and 6, whenever I received the information from Tammy that on what opposition had, there was 2 locations noted, so I went ahead and looked at both of them. I'm not sure if they were down to 1 and it was just a line between, they were just trying to measure something, but I went ahead and looked at both locations. So one thing to remember about capacity and coverage is capacity is, like I said, it's a shared bandwidth. So if you imagine you're drinking from a water hose, you're hot, working in the yard, and you're the only person drinking from the water hose, you're getting 100% of the capacity. So you have the maximum throughput. You got the maximum amount of data going through and handling everything. If you split that hose and 2 people are drinking from that hose, now each person has half the capacity. So it's a shared channel. It's a shared bandwidth. And then double that again, you have 4 people, you have 25% of the capacity for each person. Double that again, you've got 12.5%. Double that again, you've got 6.25%. As more users work in the area and more users are using their phone from home due to COVID or whatever, you're getting a lot more capacity impact. And these phones, while they, you may not be talking on them, there's all sorts of apps loaded on these phones. Right? Steve Jobs, I don't know if he realized what he was going to do. There's things going on in the background. The phone's constantly talking to the network. You're getting emails, apps are getting ping servers. There's all sorts of things going on in the background. That's one aspect. You can also, I use the Thanksgiving principle. For your house, you have Wi-Fi, you have an access point, you and your significant other, coverage is pretty good throughout the house. You've got good capacity. You don't buffer on your YouTube or you buffer on your Netflix or anything like that. You're able to walk around the house and have good service coverage as well as capacity. You're able to see the film or whatever, and it's not buffering. Thanksgiving comes along, all the family shows up. What's the first thing that happens? Everybody asks for your Wi-Fi password. Well, now all of a sudden you have a whole lot more users on that same fixed radio channel. That's a fixed asset. It's limited as to what it can do. Now the amount of traffic or the amount of bandwidth per user decreases significantly. You start to notice that rooms you had service in, you don't have service in, or you're streaming Netflix fine in this particular area, and now you're not because there's just not enough bandwidth available. It's the same thing that happens in these wireless networks. The more users, the more capacity. The more capacity, the more need to offload and expand sites, etc. There's another way to look at it. So the area where these users are that are impacting the system live in this suburban area. There's a lot of users here. There's a lot of phones. So right now, the sites kind of surround that area. So they're on the outside. They're miles away, 2 miles away, sometimes half mile away, but they're not in and among all of the users. So imagine in your the room you're in right now for the commissioners that it's full of people. And so there's people walking around. It's noisy, it's loud. You're trying to have a conversation. So someone tries to speak from a distance, it's going to be harder to hear them unless they're close to you. So if you have one person speaking to one side, you have another person on the other side of the room speaking, and another person on the other side of the room speaking, it gets pretty loud. And then you've got all the users are trying to have conversations back and forth with these entities on the outsides of this room. It gets different. So the more people in the crowd, the noisier it becomes, and the louder people have to talk to be able to communicate with each other next to each other. This is the sites. So blue pins are existing Verizon sites. These are sites that are on air. They have been maximized. They're all utilizing the maximum amount of spectrum that the FCC has awarded to Verizon, and they are out of gas. The capacity is at its peak. So Verizon engineers, they don't build sites for the heck of it. It's a long time to get one built. It's an expensive thing to do, and you don't really want to build one unless you have to. Well, 3 or 4 years ago, Verizon started to say, we're starting to raise up utilization in this area. We're going to need to build a split to help offload the traffic. Remember, fixed channel, finite resource. The cocktail party's getting louder, right? It's getting bigger. There's more users. There's more people coming into the room. Well, that's exactly what's happening. So looking at the analysis for the area, you have all of this areas being served, it's people, it's users, it's end users. And so in order to offload this sector that's facing this way, the sector facing this way, and the sector facing back this way, we have to look at where the users are. And we can say, we could go up on Glassford Hill and put a big tower and it'd be great. Well, it's not really going to help the situation over here because there's already towers between it. This becomes just another site that's generating noise. We want to put the tower where the customers are. I equate it to, if you build a house, are you going to build your bathroom 2 miles away from your house? No, you're going to build it in the house. You have to build the sites where the capacity is. These are the alternative candidate sites that opposition brought up. And once again, this 5 and 6 are the two areas that I wasn't quite sure which one they were talking about, so I went ahead and evaluated both. So once again, kind of to refresh you, because this is what's called a PCI or physical cell index. So this is a guide to tell me what sites are providing service in what areas. And when I read this, when I took that LTE application, I looked, when I took the downloads and upload test, I looked to see what site was serving this area. So you can see there's significant difference. Any different number means that it's a different serving site that's serving this area. So there's no really good main server within this environment. And you see up here in the NCs and the black dots, that's where there was either zero throughput or no connection. So it's all over the board. There's no dominant server. There's no one guy that can help provide these services. A lot of guys are trying, the sites around it are trying to provide these services, but it's like the cocktail party with the 3 people on the sides. They're not able to really take care of what's going on within this area. So I looked at alternative number 1 was the Costco. Verizon already has a site just south of the Costco. So really putting a site next to a site is not going to be a viable alternative. It's not really going to buy anything. It's actually going to noise up the environment. Alternative 2 was 0.72 miles from the proposed site down in the area around the mall. And if you can look, I did a terrain view of what's going on. So the site would be over here at this level, and it would have to pass over a hill. And RF doesn't really jump over hills. So it would require at least a 240-foot tower to be placed at the mall for it to be able to see into the area. And once again, the cocktail party situation where everybody's on the outside, the 3 people are on the outside wall, that's not really going to help fix the situation. It's just going to make it worse because now another server's in there trying to compete to help. And it's just basically telling all the mobiles to power up as loud as you can and reduce the capacity and the coverage of the area. Alternative 3 was 0.32 miles from the proposed site. There's a 120-foot peak. So once again, RF doesn't really jump. It would require a 191-foot tower within this area to be able to provide service over in this side where we're trying to help out as well. We're going to see positive benefits surrounding this site, but one of the key areas that where customers are complaining from Tammy's area was up in this area. The fourth site, 0.85 miles from proposed site, there's a 103-foot peak between the target area and the alternate location. So this would require a 174-foot tower just west of Lamb Chevrolet to be able to see down into the environment. But once again, another guy on the outside wall screaming and not really servicing the customers. Alternative 5, which was kind of like northwest of Glassford Hill. It's 2.47 miles from the proposed site. Is so within the area, it's going to be a 383-foot peak. So it would require a 450-foot tower to be able to see over the hill. Once again, the cocktail party where it's not in the room serving the people. It's out on the edge screaming. Alternative 6, farther south, I think on the southern side of the GZ property. So it's a 63-foot peak, so it would require a 135-foot tower to be able to see down into the environment. Recommendations was proposed tower places need to be where the customers are. Like I said, you don't build your house and put your bathroom 2 miles away. You put your bathroom in the house where the capacity is. Moving sites farther away only contribute to lower service levels for engineering. Engineering recruit recommends approval of the proposed site. So last, and sorry I'm taking so long, I'm trying to go as short as possible. This is the proposed site. The capacity for the area is Highway 69, Prescott Lakes Parkway, Prescott Gateway Mall. It's helping offload the sectors that are pointing into that, as well as increase the in-building service. And we saw from the test that there's a lot of areas around there that service is pretty bad within the suburban area surrounding the proposed site. Once again, here's the site. Here's the site down by Costco. Here's one neighbor here, a neighbor here, and a neighbor here. The sectors covering this area currently are pointing into this. We've got these two sectors trying to help. And remember, there wasn't much service here and there wasn't much service here, as well as this site. Now along this ridge, everybody's getting great service because they're able to see line of sight. So the commissioner that brought up the question about 35 foot, why not? You have to be able to see. It's much like wireless antennas work like our eyes and ears. Our eyes, we see because we can see that we have a line of sight to what we're looking at. Wireless antennas are the same concept. The higher you get up in frequency, the more that becomes apparent. Our eyesight is at a much higher frequency than what wireless antennas use. So we are pretty much basically sight only with our eyes. With antennas, it's the mix as you get into the higher frequency bands. Root Metrics is a third-party source. While they show okay service, it's still questionable within this area. They weren't able to test within this area. You can look at the capacity, the throughput. Remember, everybody's drinking from the same water hose. It's not very good. There's not a lot of data points. They're not able to make connections. Once again, as well, with Open Signal, you've got not a lot of people making connections in this area. This is a third-party app that's loaded on phones. If you have the Facebook app or any other apps, you're actually, when you allow them to load, you're sending data to these servers to help show good or bad situations with what the phone is. Red, of course, being bad coverage, green being good coverage. And so we have a mix within the area. The terrain of the area, there's, you guys know better than anybody, there's lots of terrain in your area. So a site needs to be able to have a line of sight within the surrounding area to provide, and one that's near or at or around the customers that's going to provide better service. Once again, more of the terrain impacts moving from the area, from the site. The terrain profiles to the south, to the southwest, to the west, they're significant. Once again, nobody's really a good dominant server. We saw that from the tests. Here's the current coverage. Green is in building coverage. Yellow is in vehicle coverage. Red is open field coverage. And where you just see land, there's not a lot of coverage. So 95% probable that most of the people aren't going to have really good service within this area. There's going to be chances, just like when I drove test, there's abilities to see that service, but it's not within the RF levels that were qualified. I mean, I was getting down to neg 110, neg 120, but we saw that the performance of the network was not that great. Here's what the new site would do to provide coverage within and around the area. It's going to help. Will it fix everything? No, but it'll make a significant improvement to what's going on in the area. This is a best server plot, so it kind of shows you this is each serving sector. There's no real dominant sectors within this area. They're all just kind of showing up and doing what they can. Then once we add the new site, we see that there becomes a good dominant sector, and we offload and provide help to the capacity needs of the sites surrounding the area with this new site. Are there any questions?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Mr. Kennedy, I hope I speak for the other commissioners that we've received a plethora of input from the community, and it's good. And I wanted to congratulate you and thank you for the technical analysis that I think allows us to make a much better decision, hopefully today.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Tom again. Steve, thanks. Thanks for a lot for that. I got a couple things I want to ask you, but first of all, can we go back? Can you go back and show me what the proposed site topography looks like? You showed the alternative sites. You showed the mountains that were in the way of these big tall towers that you would have to build. Show me what that looks like at the proposed site.
Okay, so you want to see the topography here. I have a Google Earth file open, so you can see where this site is in relation to what's going on around it, right? So here's the area to the southeast that has poor
Okay.
coverage and quality, and here's to the northeast.
What's in the way?
So right here, there's a problem with this site because it's a short site. It's on, if I remember correctly, it was on an electrical transmission line, but I'm not totally sure. So we have this, and this site's covering a lot of Highway 69. This one, once again, it's not going to be as tall of a site in this area, right? So what we have is we have terrain issues where if we build shorter sites, which we have to maintain capacity, you don't want one big site covering everything. It's not like an FM transmitter.
Can you show me the map that shows the mountains in the way of the alternative sites? Show me what
Okay.
those like for the
Okay.
for this proposed
Yes, sir.
site.
Okay, so,
Sites, you showed us that.
yep. So this is the red pins. So,
Go back to your alternative site analysis.
okay.
Do you want the cross sections?
There you go.
That the pink, yeah.
I'm interested in that bottom pink colored map for the proposed site.
Bottom pink covered map for the proposed site. You may be talking about me, sorry. This one? That one right there?
No. Go back. Go back to. Keep going back. Right there.
Yes, sir.
So that's the profile of the proposed site.
So this is the terrain profile going from the existing site to the proposed site.
Towards the southwest.
Yes, sir. So you can see right here that we have a lower area, right? And then we come over here to Frontier Village and it increases in height. So Frontier Village is over here at a higher height, but still not providing, we saw from the drive test data, still not providing the level of service within this area. So now we have this site, the proposed site would be located here, and that would be on this ridge versus being down in the lower areas. So once again, it gets line of sight or vision to the area surrounding it.
Okay, so show me where your gap is, where the coverage and capacity gap is.
Okay. All right. So here's existing coverage.
Same,
So, sir,
go back to the same map that you had.
okay.
Show me where the gap's at.
So we had, when I drove test, I saw gaps in service here. and I saw gaps in service here. And I saw a little bit in here, but along this ridge, I saw okay service, right? I can show you there. There's the download results. So you can see the areas where we don't have as good of download levels. So the southeast
Thank you, Steve, for that.
and the northeast.
To your earlier presentation, I had a third question.
Yes, sir.
In your write-up, you point out that there's no noise emission. I'm assuming this is either 24 volt or 48 volt radio equipment. Clearly, there must be some fans, some kind of cooling device to keep that radio equipment cool.
There is a heat exchanger, and once again, I'm not an equipment engineer. I'm a radio engineer, but what I've seen is within the cabinets that are on the site, there'll be one power and telecom cabinet, which provides the power for it, the 24 or 48 volt equipment, as well as the interface to the fiber networking equipment. Then there's another cabinet that's the control cabinet, and the last cabinet is the amplifier cabinet. The amplifier cabinet typically has a heat exchanger. So it's instead of like a full-blown air conditioner, it's a heat exchanger. So it doesn't have to require as much cooling because you are in slightly cooler climate. Down in Phoenix or Tucson, it requires air conditioners, but that's typically what goes on.
So to say there's no noise is not true, though. There will be some noise.
I don't know, Michelle may be able to answer that better than I do, but as far as the equipment specs, it's not like placing a generator or anything of that nature where it's louder. There'll be noise, but much like probably less than the noise of the air conditioner compressor on the outside of your house.
Do you expect to cite a backup power source up there?
You'd have to ask, Michelle would be better than that. I don't remember seeing one in any of the zoning drawings. So there wouldn't be a backup generator on site.
Correct. There's no backup generator. What's used are backup radios. So there's like a radio pack in there that they use until if it truly goes down, then they send a technician out. So Verizon currently doesn't use a backup generator for anywhere that a technician can get to within 4 hours.
I think it's an 8-hour battery string is part of the backup for the site.
Right, but the technician.
Yeah, but the technician can get there and
work
fix.
on it.
Yep.
Yeah.
To answer your question, sir?
For those of you that have been out to the site, you'll know that there's a fire and police repeater up there. It's nicely done. It has a Generac generator for backup power. And I'm assuming that works pretty darn good. And it's not 55 feet. It's at about the height of the water tower, which is 33 feet. So how does the city fire and police get away with something that
Sir,
apparently works pretty good?
that's not under consideration right now. We don't have that type of data for you. Because that was not part of the
Where I'm
application.
headed to this is,
The one thing to remember is the fire and police are using frequency bands that are much lower. So they're at UHF frequency, which is 450 megahertz and 800 megahertz. Verizon and the other wireless carriers do have 700 megahertz and 850 megahertz channels, but they also have channels up in 1900 and 2100 megahertz. And there's an auction going on. I think it's auction 107 from the FCC that will put, if I remember correctly, more spectrum available in the 3500 to 3800 megahertz. So much like our eyes and our ears, they're tuned to particular frequencies, and a frequency that's lower. If you remember some of the T-Mobile newest commercials about how it's more better, faster now because they have lower frequency spectrum that they bought. At the higher or the mid-band ranges, which is 1900 and 2100, where most of the capacity is at, they don't travel as far or penetrate the buildings through walls as well as the lower frequencies. So while the police and fire have, 150 megahertz, 450 megahertz, or 800 megahertz, the carriers do not have everything in low band. Low band is it's very sought after as a spectrum. So the federal government protects that very well because there are so many users, military, fire, police, etc. So if we have a higher frequency site, which we do, which would be 1900, 2100 megahertz, it doesn't see as far and penetrate the walls as well. So those 15, 20 foot Omni whips that are on that existing tower, they're going to be able to penetrate the walls and cover farther than what a 2100 megahertz antenna can do. So if, cellular carriers work down in 150 megahertz or 450 megahertz, you would get a lot better coverage. Like the City of Phoenix Fire Department uses the VHF 150 megahertz channels for their firefighters in buildings because of it penetrates through the building so well. So their radios work when they're fighting a fire. We don't have that luxury in the higher frequency bands because it's just the laws of physics they apply.
Steve, what I'm trying to get at here is this the least intrusive solution?
Yes, sir, it is. It's the shortest tower we can go. We meet the criteria of the city where it's multiple carriers or multiple operators can attach, and it's going to be able to see things. It's going to be able to see the areas.
And so the future carrier is going to be located below the Verizon antennas will have a lesser effect.
Slightly less, yes, sir, to be 10 foot lower. So they will have not as good a coverage as what the top set of antennas would have. But once again, in an area where service is like it is now, which is not very good, it's still going to provide a plausible and positive impact to their subscribers in the area.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any questions? Dan?
Yes, Steve, this is Stan Goligoski. Have you done the analysis on what a 35-foot tower would provide to the 49 points that you looked at in the area?
So yeah, when we run the analysis lower, so it's kind of like, let me try an everyday example. So your eyes and imagine your antennas or eyes are kind of the same thing. If you run something close and you put your hand in front of your eye, you're not going to see very far. The closer your hand comes to your eyes, the amount of vision you're going to be able to see for your eyes isn't that great. So if you put the antennas are lower and there's something closer to them, they're not going to be able to see as far as what they would. So what we try to do is we try to go to the lowest height possible, in which the lowest height possible would be about 45 feet with that second tenet at the lower height, and say, okay, what's going on in the area? Can we cover? Do we have enough line of sight to the area around it? Are we being blocked? What's going on? That's the lowest height to where blockage does not come into play. You drop down to 35, you're going to start to get blocked. It's not going to be able to see over and have line of sight to the area around it.
Got it, thanks.
Yes, sir.
Other questions? Steve, this is Don Michaelman. How many sites did you all look at in determining this would be the one that you want to apply for?
It was it's a very difficult area because of where the subscribers are and what's going on within the area. The sites that were being brought back by real estate were in areas, surrounding, and Michelle can speak more plausibly to this, to all the candidates that were evaluated by the Verizon engineer. But it was this area, it's a hard area to design because you have to be on the hill to be able to see in and fix the area that has the problem. And once again, that water tank and that area is the best place to go. And that was the one that was chosen.
Michelle, do you have any figures of how many sites were looked at?
So when we look at an area that is requested, so Verizon RF engineer, the other parcels that he asked us to look at were actual residential parcels. So we looked at, you know, the area that they gave us was that to meet the need because of the coverage issue in this area was a very small area. So the only other parcels that would meet the need in this area were fully residential parcels. And so in looking at the other parcels in the area, we determined that this would be the most palatable with what we were doing, as opposed to going on, you know, a fully residential parcel. So we did look at the entire area. So we did evaluate several parcels in the area, but came to determine that, you know, something that currently had a commercial use would be the best thing for the community. So the only other parcels that would have worked for this would have been fully residential. And we looked at probably 20 of them in the area.
The most ideal location, if you look at the terrain of the area, is going to be this hilltop. I mean, from an RF engineer point of view, not looking at zoning or anything else, this is the ideal place. It's the higher elevation. It's 5891 here. It's 58, you know, a little shorter here. This is going to be the one where it's going to have the best visibility of the surrounding area, where this guy, there's going to be a little bit of blockage back towards this area, but it still does a significantly better coverage. So if you look at from an RF point of view, this is your huckleberry. This is where you want to go. This is the place. But because of zoning and other things, right? These are residences, and this is a very available property that can be zoned correctly. This is where the site went.
Okay, thank you for that. Any
Yes, sir.
questions? All right, we will now go to the audience for questions or comments on that, and Kaylee will call out.
First, we have, sir, sorry. We do have the presentation that was approved before. Give you a moment to,
Sir, can you go ahead and introduce yourself, name, address?
Yes, is my mic on? My name is Richard Steinman. I live at 4082 Bar Circle A Road, Prescott. I've lived there for 5 years.
Okay, and I believe you have 9 other people who have given their 3 minutes to you plus yours.
That is correct.
And
There are 9 people in the audience that have waived their time and allowed me to do a presentation for the group, which is Bar Circle A and Yavapai Hills neighbors.
That's fine. Just need to make sure that the ones who are giving their time are attending to.
Yes. Yes, they are. Thank you for your time today, commissioners. I do appreciate it. Can I take off my mask? Is that okay? Because it's hard to talk and read those. First of all, I'd like to disclose right off the bat, I am not a presenter. I am a homeowner. I am here on behalf of other homeowners and just want to get our information to you so that you can make the best educated decision for the citizens of your community. I'd like to start off with recognizing people in the audience that I'm speaking for. They're all homeowners. And as Tammy's map showed, the area affected that they say that we need coverage for, there's only one person in the entire area that is opposed to this cell tower application, or I'm sorry, in favor of the cell tower application. If you notice, the whole area that they're saying needs better coverage is against it in Tammy's map that was presented earlier. Okay, so I will start off with Pinnacle's application violates existing city code. Pinnacle's application should be denied as it violates city land development code. And I will get to the reasons behind that shortly. Pinnacle's application should be denied as it violates city's general plan. Pinnacle's application should be denied as it violates wireless communication plan for Central Yavapai County. Lack of smart planning pursuant to city code. Placement of a cell tower in Yavapai Hills would inflict dramatic and wholly unnecessary adverse aesthetic impacts. Applicant has not provided a shred of evidence to establish location is the least intrusive site. Applicant fails to show how cell tower is harmonious with the character of the surrounding area. Applicant fails to show how the proposed cell tower can be minimized to the greatest extent possible by the city code. Applicant is in direct violation of City Prescott Code 9.9.5 and 2.4.49, whose explicit legislative intent is to prevent the unnecessary and substantial adverse impacts on residential properties and neighborhoods. Applicant's request for the placement of the 5-story tower in our residential neighborhood is irresponsible. No other structures stand more than 2 stories high in this area. Applicant ignores the fact that the height of the massive cell tower would cause it to stand out like a sore thumb, to dominate the skyline, and to inflict substantial adverse impacts upon many nearby homes. I'm sorry. As you can see, I'm a little nervous, but I'll get over that by the end. All right. Applicant fails to provide an accurate, meaningful visual resource assessment. Applicant provided an inherently defective visual assessment because they do not show the clear, actual aesthetic impacts the proposed tower will inflict upon the nearby homes and community. Applicant disingenuously minimizes the visual impact depictions by deliberately omitting the photo simulations, any images actually taken from the nearby homes, substantially the most severe adverse aesthetic impacts. Actually only provides photos taken from public roads from perspectives selected to minimize appearance of the adverse aesthetic impacts, and in no way accurately depicts the images those homeowners will see each and every time. They look out their bedrooms, kitchens, living room windows, or sit in their backyards. The federal court explicitly rules this type of presentation to be defective in omnipoint and that the assessment should be disregarded. Evidence of the actual adverse aesthetic impacts the proposed tower would inflict upon nearby homes. The hundreds of petition signers and nearly 100 letters written in opposition of the proposed tower is substantial evidence of the following massive adverse impacts. Domination of our views from bedroom windows, living room windows, from our decks, from our backyards, from every angle, every part of our properties. These substantial adverse aesthetic impacts are precisely the type of injurious impacts our land development code in City of Prescott was specifically intended to prevent. City Council's responsibility and legal cause for denial of application. Application deficiencies. City Council is responsible for carrying out legislative intent of our city codes, which is to protect the Yavapai Hills community from adverse impacts of towers and antennas and locate towers where adverse impacts upon our community is minimal. Upheld by federal courts, including the United States of Appeals in the Second Court, significantly and or unnecessarily adverse aesthetic impacts are proper legal grounds for a city government to deny a zoning application seeking approval for the construction of a cell tower. The United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit has recognized that when a local government is considering a cell tower application, it should accept as direct evidence of adverse aesthetic impacts the tower would inflict upon nearby homes, statements and letters from actual homeowners, which are in your packet. There are, I believe, 39 letters of the aesthetic impacts that it will have on the neighbors. So I urge you to read those. Those are very, very important. Those letters are from all the neighbors in that area that they say need better coverage. Federal courts have consistently held that the adverse aesthetic impacts are a valid basis of which to deny applications for proposed wireless facilities. Since March, council has been contacted by 225 residents in opposition of the proposed tower due to the negative aesthetic impacts. See two of the numerous homeowner letters on the next two slides that identify adverse aesthetic impacts of the potential cell tower. So we have a letter here from one of the neighbors that I'd like to read, because I think that this just goes to who you guys represent and what your job is to take into consideration both sides of the story. And I know it's hard to do that. I do it every day on my job. You have to find that fine line, keep everybody happy. But Ms. Dubois writes, I am writing this letter asking you to please deny the proposed installation of a 55 to 80 foot wireless cell tower at 4044 Bar Circle A Road. The proposed fake tree tower would be located 400 feet from my home in clear view. When I sit in my front porch, it looms large in my view. We purchased this home 11 years ago for the wonderful views, the mountainous hills, underground facilities, and neighborhood with an HOA that is very strict, that has very strict CC&R regarding landscaping. The tower would be built in a totally residential neighborhood, very close to some residences, 50 feet. This is totally unacceptable. The tower would be an eyesore for me, my neighbors, walking and driving, and visitors alike. I walk every day in our neighborhood and shudder to think about seeing that monstrosity every day. It belongs in a commercially zoned area. Please vote no on the request to build this tower and have them find an appropriate site. This is a second letter, and this one really, as a neighbor of Yavapai Hills, I really feel hits what we are trying to get at here and how the aesthetic impact is going to affect every neighbor that enjoys the reason they bought a home up there. Dear Mayor Mangarelli, Planning and Zoning Commission, and City Council members, I am writing in regards to the cell tower that is being considered to be placed in the middle of our neighborhood in Yavapai Hills. 3 years ago, when we were on the hunt for a home to spend our retirement years in, even before the realtor drove up in front of the house, we had fallen in love with the neighborhood. The views from the road as we were on our way up the hill, it wasn't just the view from our homes that we loved, which goes on for miles and miles with pine trees, desert plants, blooming flowers, huge views of the sky. Whenever we walk the neighborhood, we are in the middle of nature's paths, surrounded by various plants, different views of the forest and cities, with the sky looming above us, with nothing but beauty to be seen. The sky, with its constant changing of clouds, sometimes billowy, other times wispy, and my favorite, dark and gray stormy clouds, is one of nature's most treasured, ever-changing, and best displays. Even at night, there is nothing to obstruct the view as the planets and stars come out to light up. We are so blessed to have these differing views of nature on the ground, in the sky, as we walk, drive, bike ride, and live in this gorgeous neighborhood. I am asking you to not let the uninterrupted spectacular beauty of nature by taking it away from us. I take photos every time I go for walks, and the sky is either the subject or the background for the other beautiful scenes of trees, flowers, deer, and the forest or the city. Please let us continue to enjoy all of nature's beauty in our lives, in our photos, at all times. day and night through all seasons without the intrusiveness of a huge cell phone tower in whichever form it might come in, or in its beauty. I think that's a pretty powerful letter, and I'd like you all to think about how you would feel if that was in your backyard. This is a picture on Yavapai Hills coming up to our neighborhood and the proposed tower in the background, and how it towers over everything in its surrounding area, which totally goes against the city code. Proposed tower is clearly visible from all viewpoints, all roads around the area. This is a view from the main entry. The proposed cell tower will tower over the whole terrain. Can you imagine if this tower were to be extended for another 20 feet, up to 75 feet? Keep in mind, applicants can do so without city approval per Middle Class Tax Act 2012. This does not blend into the surrounding environment as recommended by city code. Applicant deficiencies. Pinnacle has failed to offer probative evidence to establish a need for the proposed tower at the location and height proposed, or that granting of its application would be consistent with smart planning requirements of the city code. Smart planning involves the adoption and enforcement of zoning provisions require the cell towers be strategically placed so that they minimize the number of towers needed. Entirely consistent with the intent, section 2.4.49A of code was adopted to regulate cell tower placement to minimize their potential negative impacts and encourages the location of towers in non-residential areas. In the present case, Pinnacle has failed to establish the actual gaps in personal wireless service within the city and how or why their proposed massive tower would be the best, least intrusive means remedy those gaps. Pinnacle failed to present any hard data and has failed to present any useful data at all. To the extent that applicants seeking to build cell towers seek to have their applications reviewed under the public necessity standard, the applicant must prove that the cell tower it proposes is required to render safe and adequate service, compelling reasons why their proposed installation is more feasible than at other locations. As an initial evidentiary matter, glaring absent from Pinnacle's application is any hard data that could easily be submitted as probative evidence that there is actual public necessity for that specific chosen site as opposed to being built upon alternative, less intrusive sites. Pinnacle has provided only useless, vague analysis regarding existing or potential coverages. More importantly, Pinnacle admits that the objective of this new site is an additional split to offload them due to high utilization by wireless customers, thus admitting that it only needs the proposed facility for offloading, and it's not because there are significant gaps in wireless coverage. And I'd just like to defer back to Mr. Kennedy's study that he took with a cell phone. That study is with a cell phone that has an antenna, and that antenna could be a bad antenna. So it's not hard data. Verizon's own data depicted on their website at 4044 Bar Circle A Road, Prescott, reflects that there is no coverage gap anywhere in the close proximity to it. As such, Pinnacle's application should be denied. 4 principal dangers of irresponsibly placed monopole cell towers: structure failure, fires, ice falls, and debris falls. So these are pretty important as a homeowner that lives 50 feet away from a cell tower. One of the most common failures of failure and complete collapse of a monopole cell tower are base plate failures. And these, if you research cell tower failures, they happen all the time. This is not a rare occurrence. These are things that happen all the time. another base plate failure. And now here we have a cell tower catching fire. And they can catch fire for numerous reasons. They can catch fire because they collapse. And in our terrain and the winds that blow up there, I would hate to see a cell tower on fire and collapse and start a forest fire and wipe out our neighborhood. And that is a danger that we have to take into consideration. Pinnacle's application must be denied because the proposed location fails to afford any meaningful fall or safe zone. Pinnacle's application does not allow for the 100% height setback from all adjacent properties. So-called self-implosion engineering, notwithstanding high winds, could certainly create the situation pictured here. And as you guys know, we get some 70-mile-an-hour winds up there as each year. And cell towers, it's kind of a scary subject when your home's right there, and if the wind's taking that thing, you know, just because it's on a platform doesn't mean it's going to stay on that platform if it's got wind behind it. Ice falls, and then ice falls are kind of the same scenario. Winter weather can be severe here in Prescott with heavy snow and freezing temperatures with high winds. These conditions can create dangerous ice falls from the cell tower onto adjacent properties. Chunks of these ice falls can break off and be blown onto adjacent property structures, creating property damage. This article in its entirety is included in your packets. Monopole towers are subject to structural failures caused by debris falls, which can result in damage and injury. Again, another picture of another scenario, and they're all over. They happen all the time. Application should be denied due to lack of safe fall zone. Due to the well-documented dangers which the irresponsibly placement of a monopole cell tower presents, local governments across the United States have enacted and enforced zoning provisions to ensure that installation of such towers, including fall safe zones, are of sufficient size to preserve the health and safety of their residents. Pinnacle is proposing a 55-foot monopole be located 50 feet from adjacent homeowners' property lines. That does not create a safe fall zone. Adding insult to injury, once approved, applicant can increase tower height by another 20 feet, up to 75 feet without approval from the city per the Middle Class Tax Act and Job Creation Act of 2012. Proposed installation, will inflict substantial and wholly unnecessary losses and values of adjacent and nearby residential properties. In the worst cases, cell towers built in their existing homes have caused the homes to be rendered wholly unsellable. Federal courts have recognized that it is perfectly proper for a local zoning authority to consider the opinions of professional licensed real estate brokers as to the reduction in property values that an irresponsibly placed wireless facility would inflict upon nearby homes. The following 3 slides from local professional licensed realtors provide such evidence that home values can be negatively impacted by a 5% to 20% reduction in value to wholly unsellable. So we have a letter here from Better Homes and Gardens, Bloomtree, that talks about, and this is a local realtor with many years of experience and many local years of experience, who is verifying what I had just read to you. And then again, in the next letter, we have another realtor who is local, has many years of experience, and has also supported what I have read to you. And then a third letter from One Realty, One Group, again, supporting what I have read to you. She has they have many years of experience, both in the real estate business as well as the local area. Yavapai County Assessor's Letter advises negative impact to property value. Yavapai County Assessor advises that placement of cell towers in residential areas do create a negative impact to valuation of property. This in effect will reduce property tax revenues. The next slide is a copy of the assessor's letter advising the decline in property valuations due to placement of cell towers in residential areas. So this is from the Yavapai County Assessor that is verifying that he will put a tag on those properties in the surrounding area of this cell tower, thereby reducing the value of those homes and reducing the property taxes that the city and county receive from those homes. So not only by placing the cell tower in a residential area are you providing a negative impact to the residents of that area, you're also providing a negative impact to your tax base. Whereas if it was built in a commercial area, I believe, my opinion, that it would provide value to a commercial area. So I would like to, looks like you're okay. I'm okay, got plenty of time?
Still have 10 minutes.
Okay, as I was listening to Mr. Kennedy's presentation, and I respect Mr. Kennedy, I'm a business person, I'm a community person, we're not against cell towers. We use cell phones, we want cell towers. We just want them to be strategically placed in our community. You know, if it were your mother or your daughter who invested $500,000 or more, which these homes in this area are, you know, you would want to help protect those values of our neighbors, of the people in that area. So that being said, I just think that the presentation made by Mr. Kennedy and in his talking about how tall the cell towers would have to be if they were put in those other areas were an estimate based upon his driving through there and looking at them, and not a true study. And so that's my opinion. There's no fact behind that, but please take that into consideration as you're making your decisions today. Is there any other comments, Rob, that we have from the group, as we still have a few minutes left that you'd like to add?
Well, I think, first of all, you did a great job. Between the mask and being distance, it's kind of hard to see.
You have to identify yourself.
My name is Rob Ratner. I'll take off this one too. And basically, we represent, as you know, so many residents in the area. And just to reiterate, 51 feet, I guess, if we estimate, if I'm a cell tower, 51 feet might be as close as the screen or something to that effect. The issue that the engineer, Mr. Kennedy, information gave to you was done on consumer, anything that you can get apps, not professional, as far as I'm concerned, professional equipment that an engineer should have provided you with. Again, these apps, you can download them, they're free. The accuracy of these apps, I can attest to. But you would expect more from a company that would be posing this to you and to our community. We'd like you to consider the ramifications to people who have put their retirement money coming to live in Prescott, beautiful Prescott. And all of a sudden, this is zone residential. This is not a commercial property. This is a residential piece of property that a commercial venture is going to be put on. Now, let me make it clear. This is a money-making venture. This is not being proposed by Verizon only. This is done, as you know, by another party second party, third party company that is connecting to Verizon. So this is unusual, I think, because if Verizon wanted to come to the city of Prescott with a need, then Verizon would have come to you directly. Why does a party like Pinnacle come to you to do this as a extra party? It's a money-making adventure. This company who owns this residential parcel will be making money from not only Verizon, but for everybody else who jumps on this pole for years and years to come. So, does the council and the commission support big business? Or do you support our residents walking and supporting our motto, Prescott is everyone's hometown? I hope it has not become Prescott is everybody's, if it's every developer's hometown. Thank you for your consideration.
I would just like to reflect back to one other thing. I wrote some notes down here as we were working through the slides from Mr. Kennedy, and if you read through those very specifically, his studies of the RF allowance, FCC allowable RF frequency to a body is studied through the FCC in 30-minute increments. His studies are about 30-minute increments of this exposure, not 24-hour increments of the exposure. So I'd just like you guys to take that in consideration too as you're watching or looking through all the documentation and making your decisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. I think you did a very commendable job of presenting this. Before we go to other participants in the audience who want to make a presentation, I'd like to give the applicant an opportunity to come back with information, since we had a very long presentation here within the time frame, and see if the applicant wants to make any comments before we go on to other parties in the audience here.
Yes, I would. Thank you so much. So I do want to respond to a couple of comments that were made. And, you know, we did offer at the first neighborhood meeting, as well as at the second neighborhood meeting, to go out to individual homes and take pictures and do renderings from those homes. The response that we had received from the homeowners was that whatever photos we did weren't going to be real, or they would be doctored. So, you know, I do want to remind not only the homeowners, but the council as well, is that we understand that this is all part of public record. You know, we're not trying to hide anything. We are simply giving you the facts to the best of our abilities. Steve's tests, he is licensed, he is contracted, you know, he is a third party. So we are trying to give everybody the facts in the clearest and most direct manner that we can. We did meet with the HOA in the area. We are building a 55-foot tower. The tower is not 80 feet, it's 55 feet. It's 50 feet to top of steel, 5 feet of branches. I would say that, you know, the water tower has been there. You know, this is the second shortest site in the town of Prescott that we are proposing. We are very cognizant of where it's being placed. You know, Steve's Kennedy's data is scientific data. You know, and I'll let him respond to that portion of it. The other thing that I do want to address is that we follow all the codes that are set by the town of Prescott. You know, the 2018 IBC, 2018 IFC, the 2018 IMC, 2017 NEC. Those are all codes that the town of Prescott sets. So as far as wind gusts or ice fails, we meet all of your codes. That's 101 mile per hour wind gusts for your towers. I will tell you that in the entire time that I have been doing towers, and that all of the folks that I know, I have only seen towers fall when they are tampered with by people. Or if, occasionally, and I honestly have never seen one, but I have seen one set on fire by an arsonist. If you look at the pictures from Hurricane Katrina, that actually comes to mind, because one of the things that struck me when I watched all of the videos from Hurricane Katrina was the things that were still standing were the cell towers. So I would say that, ice can form on anything in Prescott, not just a cell tower. What about the existing trees that are surrounding the houses currently? What about the water tower out there or anything else? So I do understand their concerns, but at the same time, this area, or this particular parcel, already has other commercial things on it. After, they had reached out to the assessor, we actually reached out to the assessor as well to ask him if he had evaluated the properties in the area due to the water tower that was there currently. And he said, no, he had not. So, that is also something to keep in mind. There is already an existing commercial thing on this parcel that we are proposing. And in regards to Pinnacle representing Verizon, Verizon doesn't do any of these towers directly. They always hire a third party to do these. So we currently represent Verizon in multiple states. That's just the way that it works. So Verizon is coming to you directly to request a new site. I will let Steve respond to, whether his data is true and scientific. But thank you.
So in talking about the person that brought up that the alternative candidates were not studied and evaluated, they were. The thing that shows the most significant impact is the terrain. It's the elevation, it's the ridges. RF doesn't lob over a hill to reach down and hit another hill. There's a line of sight criteria. The frequency bands that carriers use, there has to be line of sight. The amount of line of sight that those existing antennas on the existing towers, those 15-foot Omni whips, it's not as line of sight. It's a lower frequency band. The higher the frequency band, the more line of sight it is. That's why our ears work differently than our eyes. Our ears hear low frequencies. Our eyes see high frequencies. Our ears can hear where our eyes can't see. That's because they're at different frequency bands. Well, the same thing happens in wireless. The frequency bands that are lower, you can move around corners better, you can penetrate things better. The higher frequency bands, you can't. So each alternative site was analyzed. The terrain plays a significant impact in what's going on. And that's why those tower heights, the tower heights were basically look at what the terrain elevation is at the existing proposed candidate by opposition, look at the terrain between that and the existing in the proposed site by Pinnacle, and see what the difference is, and then add in and look at what the line of sight values and what the trigonometry is going to be required to be able to cover within that area. The second aspect about test equipment, I did this test in a way to do or show the same thing as what any typical subscriber would use. So I can imagine probably over 90% of the people in the room that you're sitting in probably have a cell phone in their pocket or purse. That's typical from what these manufacturers make. For me to go out there, I thought, well, the best thing for me to do is to emulate what the existing subscribers have. That's either Samsung phones, Galaxy phones, Apple phones, whatever. They're pretty much the same thing as far as, so I looked at it from a consumer standpoint and I ran what they're going on there. And yes, the apps are free. They can be downloaded. Once again, I tried to assimilate or act just like a standard consumer instead of bringing a big, $200,000 piece of test gear out there and with antennas all over the roof and showing what that sees. I wanted to see what the consumer sees. And once again, remember, this was me being in a vehicle. If I walk into a house, it's a different story. It's even worse. So the data I give you is what the customers see in the area, what the network provides in the area. I use these phones all over Phoenix, all over the area, all over the United States. They work just fine. They don't have bad antennas. If they have a bad antenna, it's going to be really quick to see that there's a problem because I'm going to see the issue because it's not going to be doing what it was done in the previous time. These are the same models of phones that any one of you have in your pocket or purse. That's
Right. I have a question for you here. The applicant has to meet 5 obligations to have a cell tower. And the first one is that the proposed cell tower closes a significant gap in its own coverage in the least intrusive way possible. You had mentioned, going around with the cell phone, testing at different sites around here and seeing what the what reception was and so forth. Are there other tests that have been done, or are there any other things that could be done to show there's a significant gap in coverage?
So within wireless carriers and Verizon or T-Mobile or AT&T, they have internal systems that the system performance engineer uses to look at statistics. They analyze what's going on in the area relative to calls, what the calls are requiring, what the connections are requiring, and all the data. Then they forecast and they look at this on a 3-year, 4-year term and see how far out are we going to need something? Is it going to grow beyond what the existing coverage or capacity can provide? This site was identified, or this area was identified 4 years ago. It said things are coming. It's growing in this area. We're going to need to do something. And the engineers said, okay, let's go ahead and issue a search ring. We need to put a site out here. And usually it takes 2 to 3 years to get a site approved. We're coming into year 4, year 5, but it takes time. So we need to do it early enough. So system performance engineer data is one of the main drivers within Verizon that shows that. The other performance data that they utilize is the phones themselves. So Verizon has, whenever they buy the phones from these manufacturers, they load a piece of software on these phones that gives information back to the network to say, here, I'm phone X, I'm in this area, I'm getting a good service or I'm getting a not so good service. Here's what my data looks like. It's just RF data. It's just RF signaling data, throughput data, things of that nature. And it feeds back into servers or systems within Verizon to say, hey, there's a lot of issues in this area, or everything's running fine. And we can see what sectors are providing service to what areas and what kind of quality that is. That's the second aspect that Verizon engineers use to look at to see what's going on within this area. So we showed you with propagation plots with RSRP levels, which is basically reference signal, reference power, the red, green, blue plot that shows coverage where there was no coverage on the northern side. And we put the new side in, there is coverage. We showed you the best server plots. I went ahead and did the drive test in the area, showing that there is a significant impact to throughput levels within the area, that there is no dominant server from a consumer type application. So instead of using, big expensive test equipment, I use what everybody has in their pocket using in the area and show you that that's showing a significant gap in coverage or service, as well as a capacity impact, because the values of upload and download speeds happening were they were all over the map. They were horrible.
Okay, thank you. Kaylee, how many people from the audience do we have to hear from? I want to speak. Rough number.
Okay, I have 4 comment cards. Would we like to take those now?
Well, what I'm thinking, I'm seeing people wander out of the room. Maybe we need to take a break here for about 10 minutes and we'll reconvene at, I believe, what, 5 after? Yeah.
No, it's not. He's not. You know, my friend was, summer IT, you pull up out of our neighborhood, you can see our water tower. I mean, it's gonna be seen from everywhere. I started with only Kai's name on it, sitting on like Tim's.
George is right. Seeming more like yours. We need to see that. It's only so it should be setback wise. If you want to do it right. So why we didn't run out? I don't know. But anyway, I mean, that's a good question. Right. I just wandered around. Oh, did they? Oh, yeah. No. Those two. But you're part of us. Okay, all right, yeah, I guess, all right, that's probably. Oh, there you go, that's fine. I'm gonna ask it's all.
Irrelevant. Either way. You think I'll be able to make it?
I included that comment in my. You know, I was supposed to put it on the visual, and that was something I did. I picked out the ordinance.
Where's the hubs?
He's at home on Zoom. He's hoping sitting there with his hand up, ready to. So Anne and he are at home on Zoom.
Supposedly, it hopefully works.
So as soon as it turned on, he put his hand up for a question. And hopefully it's been registered, we'll get to ask it.
I got 5 more minutes, right? Brian's asking me how long I'm gonna be. I'm like,
Could be another hour.
everything snapped. You're like, snap, crack, and pop.
What?
raised 2 kids there. When we moved to Yavapai Hills, the water tank was there, but none of the houses that are worried about the aesthetics of this cell tower were there. And this property is an aesthetically compromised property to begin with, because we're talking about a 1.5 million gallon water tank. If that is not aesthetically compromised, a 50-foot cell or 55-foot cell tower is not going to change their property values. Yet they all bought their lots and built their homes with that water tank in their backyard, 33 feet tall. And then they situated their houses so their views go away from the water tank, and they have these spectacular views. And the tower is going to be behind their view. So when they're sitting on their front porch enjoying their 100-mile view, the water tank, the tower is going to be behind them. Now, at my address in 638 Fillory Drive, the cell reception is absolutely terrible. We have to typically go outside and sit on our back deck or front porch in order to have a phone conversation. And typically, the call will break up, or the call will drop. And I did my own tests. I didn't even know about the test that Verizon was doing, but I did my own test, and I drove around Yavapai Hills. And my test results match almost exactly identical to the test results from Verizon. And if you look at Verizon, the 638 Fillory Drive, they have the different colored pins. There's a black pin at my address, which means little or no service. And I found that in many other places in Yavapai Hills, especially not only on the front side where I'm at, but also some residents that live on the back side of Yavapai Hills. That is the area that's a cellular black hole in particular. If this tower is denied, then in order to fill the gaps both on the front side and the back side, you're probably going to have to put up 2 cell towers instead of just 1 cell tower, and if not more. And for you to deny Verizon's application would be to deny us cell service, which we all have cell phones, we all use them every day, our lives depend on them, and you're taking away a utility that is equivalent to taking away water, sewer, gas, or electric if you deny the cell tower. Please approve their application.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, Kaylee.
Ted Duncan.
My name's Ted
Ted,
Duncan.
could you bring the mic down more towards you there? That's all right. Thank you.
My name is Ted Duncan. I live at 4742 Sharpshooter Way, Preston, Arizona, 86301. I have no cell service, as most of my neighbors, and you probably had a lot more support for the tower if the rest of us had been informed. I consider this a safety issue. I have a landline plus cell phone. The landline comes through Sparklight. If we lose power, we lose our phones. We have no means of communicating for safety or fire. Medical, nothing. We can't get 911. It's very frustrating because we have to have both cell phones for today's world and a landline so we can get calls to our homes. Now, these people were talking about cell phone fires. If on a power outage, we were to have a house fire that happened to catch some of that dry brush, it's going up the hill where those folks live. High winds and all fires go uphill. We all know that. I would appreciate that if you would approve this tower. We need it. People's lives could be in danger. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Edward Wolf.
name is Edward Wolf. I live on Tom Mix Trail in Yavapai Hills, Prescott, Arizona. First of all, I'll state that I'm opposed to this cell tower for aesthetic reasons, medical reasons, and property values. What I'd like to know from the board, how many more cell towers are planned in Prescott and in Yavapai Hills? Because it sounds like to me, from what I've listened to today, that all this mountainous terrain is going to require more cell towers, not less. And it also sounds to me like Verizon is expecting collateral damage to local residents' property, medical, and aesthetics. And they really don't care. This is big money trampling on our property rights and our values and everything else. To me, Glassford Hill would serve the areas in question. And it's away from everyone's residential area. And it's high enough that I think it would serve better than this tower would. All the folks who want this monstrosity in my yard, would you be willing to accept the tower in your yards? Okay, it sounds like NIMBY, not in my backyard. Okay, and the question that I have to each and every board member is, would you like this tower in your yard? And if you could answer yes or no and explain your answer. See, because it seems like the majority of citizens throughout the United States don't want these things in their yard, yet they want good cell service. Well, that's where the problem comes in. And we need to find commercial areas where this can be done and where Yankee ingenuity. So what I've observed here is we observe dark sky. That's where all lighting is focused downward, all right? And we do that with reverence. We to protect that aesthetic view and our night vision and all the rest of that stuff. So I think that this cell tower should be denied for that reason alone. So thank you all for listening.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
point of order. We should ask any speaker to speak if they have something new that we haven't heard in the general presentation of 30 minutes. In the case of the first two speakers, that was true. The third speaker went over information that we've already heard, so we don't need to hear it again.
I have something new. Okay, I have something new.
Okay, are you, do you have a speaker card?
Yes.
Okay, yes, we'll get to you. Eileen Wolf. Hi, good morning. My name is Eileen Wolf. I live at 818 Tom Mix Trail. I had the pleasure to speak to Scott McClintock. He's the administrator of the water tank right next to my home. The proposed cell tower would be 81 feet to my house. And I asked him, what would happen if the cell tower fell on the water tank? He said, that's a very interesting question. And he gave me the specific answer. He said, the skin of the water tower is very thin. The water tower is made only to hold the water. So if the cell tower fell on the water tank, what would happen? And all of you here, you have to listen very clearly, because you would be responsible in your decision, as well as all the council members. Because this is an insurance risk, and you will be liable, and the insurance and the lawsuits will be astronomical. This is going to be on the record now. Scott McClintock told me himself that it would open the water tank. It would flood down to all the people below, because I'm on top of the hill. It would go directly down and flood and kill the people below. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Of the ones remaining, do we have new information coming in?
Sharon Garrison. Do you have new information?
Yes, only slightly new.
Okay.
My name is Sharon Garrison. I live at 846 Yellow Pine Mills Drive. I'll try to project. Oh, okay, I did. I live at 846 Yellow Pine Mills Drive. I live directly beneath the water tower. When we purchased our property and built our home, we were aware of the fact that the water tower was there. We have a lovely view. It made it worth it for us. However, we were assured that everything was safe. However, we've got a little fat boy across the street full of thousands of gallons of water. Now we're going to build a tall, skinny guy right next to him because it's commercial property, or this is, that's where we should co-locate. The problem is, tall guy is going to collect the ice and the snow, which I can attest. I shovel out of my driveway every winter, and the ice gets very thick, very heavy. The branches that would stick out from this cell tower in an effort to camouflage it will collect that ice and snow. I can tell you this. I've experienced this. Should that wind, the cell tower doesn't even have to fall. If the wind blows, and it blows up there, and the ice comes off and punctures the top of the water tank, which we're told is not as thick because the tank wasn't built to hold water that way. It's built this way. If it punctures that, it will rupture the tower or the water tank. All of that water is going to go right down my driveway, and my house is going to end up at the bottom of the hill at the farm. And mine won't be the only house. So I am scared to death. I don't see how you can possibly protect my investment, my life, my home, my children, my family, my neighbors from the drastic devastation that that tower rupturing that tank would cause. I really, really am begging you, please consider this, because structurally it can't happen. You can't approve this. Rest my kids.
Thank you, ma'am.
You.
Any other ones?
I have a card from Fran Davis. Fran, do you have new information?
I think I do.
Come on up.
Good morning. I know it's been a long meeting, so I'll make this quick. I only have 3 minutes anyway. My name is Fran Davis. I live at 766 Tom Mix Trail. Recent escapee from the state of California about 3 years ago. We chose Prescott after 5 years looking for a wonderful place to retire. And we chose Yavapai Hills for the aesthetic value and the open kind of environment that it provides. All that being said, certainly aware of the water tower, the building, and the 2 antennas that were there. And we were okay with that. We can see it every day when we walk, but it seems to blend in. The existing towers are slim monopole. They're not big trees that overwhelm the skyline. All that being said, I think this is very kind of a subjective issue in terms of trying to balance property rights, neighborhood concerns, and business rights and gap coverage. I know it's a mixed bag of things that you all have to consider. We hope that our considerations as residents who love the aesthetic and bucolic area, and that's what we bought into, have equal weight and value in your considerations. We are not opposed to cell sites. We are not opposed to cell phones. We all have them. It's part of life. We're just opposed to that particular location. We think that there are alternative sites. We don't think that the applicant has given due diligence in reviewing those alternative sites. In fact, there were no reviews of the alternative sites in their original presentation or application package. Those alternative sites were just reviewed on the second go around after the initial opposition indicated to them that you haven't done your due diligence. We too could hire an RF engineer who would provide just as strong information and data opposing and arguing what Mr. Kennedy did, not trying to impugn Mr. Kennedy's findings or his work, just saying that, for example, their real estate presentation done by a firm for Phoenix, Arizona, we have provided you real estate information in terms of the devaluation of property values done by realtors, licensed realtors here in Prescott, Arizona, not Phoenix. So for everything that's in their application, if we have the money and the wherewithal that Verizon had, we could provide opposing information. So all that being said, and I know my time is getting short, I just would like to ask each and every one of you as residents and representatives of us here in Prescott to give our concerns equal weight and balance. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Is that it, Kaylee?
That's all.
Okay. Why don't we, do we have anybody on Zoom who wants to make a presentation?
Yes, we do have a couple of people on Zoom that want to do a presentation too.
Okay, why don't we start with them?
Give me a second here to get that up for this. And Friday, you can unmute yourself.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Ann Friday. I live at 3398 Bar Circle A Road in the Ranch at Prescott, within clear view of the proposed 55-foot cell tower. Is this tower location the least intrusive means as required by the FCC? The map you're looking at shows the proposed tower site is surrounded in all directions by raw, undeveloped land and by existing towers to include Badger Mountain to the south, Glassford Hill to the north, each already having a Verizon cell tower on their summits. In January 2020, Sun State Towers claims on page 4 of their Pinnacle application to have evaluated all of these sites and found no co-location options available. Slide 2, please. Here is Mr. Kennedy's original site search. He stated in the June 2020 city webinar on recording that he did not look at alternate sites. Quote, this candidate was offered and Verizon accepted. He also said he searched, quote, for 1/16 to 1/8 of a mile from the Giese parcel. This site was selected before Mr. Kennedy's site search he conducted this week. Slide 3, please. This week, Mr. Kennedy looked at 6 alternate sites and found them all deficient. With Mr. Kennedy's years of experience, his choice of deficient sites appears deliberate because he put them all behind mountains. Mr. Kennedy did not evaluate the 2 superior sites that we have identified. Slide 4, please. Mr. Kennedy notes a deficient site at Lamb Chevrolet. The superior site we suggested is behind York Dodge, owned by the city of Prescott, easily accessible, on the hillside, not in the topographically challenged area at Lamb Chevrolet. Our superior site is a recommendation of this week's study session, wherein Mr. Michael Lamar, city manager, stated the city should, quote, encourage the provider to put the cell tower on city-owned land. Mr. Blair stated the tower should be, quote, built in the city right-of-way. And Mr. Worley said, quote, we strengthen the city locations if available. This city-owned site is in line with the North Bowl and only 4,700 feet from the most intrusive Bar Circle A Road proposed tower site. This city site is far superior and certainly the least intrusive, being surrounded by commercial vacant land, and the tower lease money will go into the city coffers. Slide 5. Mr. Kennedy looked at a deficient and steeply sloped Giese site that we did not suggest, but he did not look at the northern Giese parcel, having an unobstructed direct line of sight into the North Bowl at the lower elevation. This entirely undeveloped parcel is ideal for the set-aside uses, as Ms. Bryn Stotler recommended in this week's study session, in which City Attorney John Palladini said, quote, ideal to coordinate with the developer.
You want her to continue?
Yes.
Okay. let her continue. And you need to unmute yourself.
How did that happen?
Your time was up, so we muted you till the chairman said you can continue, but he said you can continue.
Well, I only had another sentence. This entirely undeveloped parcel is ideal for the set-aside uses, as Ms. Bryn Stotler recommended, and which City Attorney John Palladini said, quote, "It's ideal to coordinate with the developer ahead of time." And Mr. Giese would receive the tower lease money. The North Bowl would have their smaller tower closer to them as recommended by Mr. Kennedy, but not in their backyards, like the one on Bar Circle A Road will be in our backyards. And this will be a win-win for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Tammy, anybody else?
Yes, we had Mr. Let's see, Mr. Levy, are you on there?
Hi.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Can I start?
Yes.
Can you see me?
Name and address, please.
Okay. So I'm Roy Levy. I own 3613 Bar Circle A Road, where I will have a clear view of this massive tower looming over both subdivisions. Mr. Kennedy submitted a service quality field test showing open signal download at the intersections of Hornet and Hornet Fillery and Hornet Hummingbird. The map indicates 0 or no connection. Ann Friday told me that on October 26, 2020, she drove there, made a cell phone call from each black pin location at the same time of morning as Mr. Kennedy's test. She told me that she dialed once each time, got a quick connection with Mr. Rob Ratner, talked to him briefly, coming in loud and clear, as did she to him. This was repeated 4 more times from each of the black pin locations, all having the same excellent results. The map's black shadows show where the topographical challenges occur, as City Attorney Mr. Palladini refers to them. They cause the RF waves to break up across these topographical demarcation lines, as expert John Lindsay testified to in the July 2020 study session, offering little enhanced cell coverage to these low-lying areas. Mr. Giese's undeveloped parcels also allow for the set-aside uses recommended by Ms. Stotler this week and will generate tower lease money to Mr. Giese. Mr. Kennedy has provided no meaningful comparisons showing that the proposed tower 260 feet above on Bar Circle A Road will provide better service than a smaller tower closer to Fillery. Slide 7, please. Thank you. October 22nd, 2020, the Verizon website shows the excellent coverage they already have at Fillery Hummingbird, the same area Mr. Kennedy indicated as 0 on the previous slide. And Friday made her 5 perfect cell phone calls, which substantiates Verizon's website data and not Mr. Kennedy's field test study. There is no significant service gap here, according to Verizon's own data and Ann Friday's own cell phone call experience. Slide 8, please. Okay. On October 22nd, 2020, the Verizon website indicates the Verizon service in the Yavapai Hills area surrounding the proposed tower site is excellent, and there is no significant service gap. Mr. Kennedy acknowledges this on page 8 of his service quality field test, where he writes that the Hilltop already has good coverage. But in his alternative site recommendation on page 13, he writes, proposed towers place sites where the wireless customers are located. This is a patently misleading recommendation. This application must be denied due to no significant service gap. It is proposed in the most intrusive location in 2 densely populated residential neighborhoods, creating significant adverse aesthetic impacts in Yavapai Hills and the Branch at Prescott Mystic Heights, causing these residents a significant loss in property values and a dangerous and inadequate fall zone. We have proposed 2 superior alternate sites, and that will not put a massive tower in anyone's backyard. A win-win for everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Andy, anybody else?
Yes, sir. We have a Peter and Judy Dore. You can unmute yourself. Yeah.
Yes, can you hear me? Okay, my name is Peter Dore. I reside at 724 Tom Mix Trail. During the last council study session, and again this morning, much was made of the site as being already compromised. Indeed, it is compromised, but not in the way the city council members seem to believe. There are two parcels, 10319 253 and 10318 073, one belonging to the city of Prescott, the other belonging to Yavapai Hills LLC. A 3 million gallon city water tank sits astride the two parcels. The pump house, equipment room with emergency backup generator and flammable fuel, and the fire, police emergency antenna, equipment room, along with emergency backup generator and flammable fuel, sit on private land owned by the Yavapai Hills Development LLC. After an exhaustive search by city officials, not one permit application, record of agreement, or documentation exists in city records as to why or how city infrastructure sits on private land. No documents or records exist showing right-of-way, grants, or access easement. To say that a conflict of interest exists is putting it mildly. At best, it is pure negligence and incompetence on the part of the city. At worst, it's collusion between the city and Yavapai Hills LLC to circumvent standing permitting processes to the financial benefit of Yavapai Hills LLC. Permitting of this SUP will afford Yavapai Hills Development significant financial gain at the expense of residents' property values. And I have all these documents and we can make them available to the city attorney, and I'm sure he would find them very, very interesting. And I find it offensive that during this, that the Michelle from Yavapai, from Pinnacle, would suggest that, and by raising the spectre, if their tower is not erected, people will die. I think that should be taken out of the record because it's totally inappropriate and unprofessional. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Next, we have Robert Howlett. And you can unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. My name is Robert Halleck and my wife is Norma Halleck. We own property at 942 Yavapai Hills Drive. We bought this property with the hope of building a retirement home on that property, given the aesthetic values of the neighborhood and the values of the folks that live in that neighborhood, and indeed the environment all around Prescott. It's extremely attractive. We are totally opposed to positioning a tower such as this in a residential neighborhood. I think Pinnacle has not told the Planning Commission the effect of increasing the elevation of existing Verizon towers. What would that do to coverage in the area? Eliminating need to put a tower on top of the hill. We also asked at the first neighborhood meeting that an intensity map be provided 1,500 feet out from the proposed tower site that would allow any resident to be able to see the expected signal strength at their location. This was not provided, although it was said at the meeting that it would be. What was provided instead were maps showing where FCC regulations would be complied with and the percentage of FCC regulations complied with. This is inadequate, did not respond to the request. Indeed, the FCC requirements, as specified by an earlier speaker, talk about the radiation level in a 30-minute interval. A 30-minute interval. Now think about it. If you stand in the sunshine for a 30-minute interval, you might not get a heavy sunburn. You stand in the sunshine for 24 hours a day, if the sun is out that long, you're going to get quite a sunburn. So it's not just that you comply with FCC guidelines, you have to do it 24 hours a day to protect the population. That is something that has not been addressed by Pinnacle at all. Mr. Kennedy talked about the positioning of a toilet, and you'd like the toilet in proximity to the need. My wife points out that you don't sit on a toilet 24 hours a day. And if you see the point, people who live near this antenna will be exposed 24 hours a day. It's literally, in my opinion, not safe to put such a tower in the middle of a residential area. We are totally opposed. The speaker before me, I have nothing to say about what he had to say, but the two prior speakers, we agree 100% with their presentations. They are in opposition for excellent reasons. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Next, we have Alan and Mindy Gelman. You can unmute yourself. Alan and Mindy Gelman.
Yes, this is Mindy Delman, 4725 Hornet Drive. The applicant has made repeated point to the nature that the site is commercial. Commercial, as defined by Webster's Dictionary, is for profit. None of the other existing structures meet that definition. This site is located in an exclusively residential neighborhood. By allowing the tower to be erected there, you are setting a horrible precedent for all our residential communities in Prescott. The mere need to require variance to proceed with this tower is indicative of the fact that this site is inappropriate. We wholeheartedly oppose the building of any such structure. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Last, we have Jeff Nolan. You can unmute yourself.
Yes, this is Jeff Nolan. I live at 782 Tom Mix Trail, about 350 feet from the proposed site. I have 34 years experience in the Arizona commercial and residential real estate markets. I'm a former certified property tax appraiser and worked in Maricopa County. I was formally appointed by Governor Brewer to the Arizona Board of Appraisal, which that board gets to hear complaints against appraisers for misleading or perhaps not evaluating negative influences. I was also appointed by Governor Ducey to the Arizona State Board of Equalization, and also I've been approved by the Arizona Tax Court to represent litigants in small claims procedures for property tax matters where there's been a decline in market value. Now, I didn't get a chance to speak at your planning session, but there's a few things that I'd like you to consider. One is that you need to protect the homeowners and the public. Do no harm. Challenge the cell companies supporting data when you're encroaching into residential areas. Yavapai Hills units 4 and 5 is where Tract A is located. It's a 1993 subdivision, 27 years old. The CCNRs for that surrounding subdivision says all utilities will be underground, and buyers over the last 27 years know what they're getting with a water tower. You've seen evidence from the Yavapai County assessor, who has 20 years experience. He's also responsible for appraising all properties in Yavapai County on an annual basis. And he's indicated a reduction in value, other realtors as well. But I have some items of concern to me, and that involves the appraisal or market impact study presented by Pinnacle. One is the effective date of that appraisal is April of 2018, which is far too old to give it any credibility. The intended user is not Pinnacle Consulting, Verizon, or Yavapai Hills Developers LLC, or the city of Prescott. It was prepared for T-Mobile. The market study is all in Phoenix. There's no study of premium view mountain residential subdivisions in Yavapai County. Their survey was 0.25 miles going out as far as a mile. What they failed to do, the appraiser failed to do, is evaluate the market value impact of the adjacent lots, adjacent homes. In their own study, there's 17 pairings indicating lower property values. This is going to cause harm to the public, especially those adjacent to the subject property. The market study presented by Pinnacle is misleading in many ways. The appraiser only asked realtors, market participants, the only question asked, do buyers ask how cell services are in this area, or do buyers check their phone signal? The appraiser should have probed for a question about market participants' reaction to a cell tower 55 feet tall, only 50 feet from the home.
Sir, your time's up.
Mr. Chairman.
There's no other public on Zoom that wish to speak.
Thank you. Ted?
As opposed as I am to exceeding your time, I'd like to ask the last speaker, you said you had 3 points, and I think I was taking copious notes, and you only covered the first one, which was home values, without a dissertation. Could you just give me the other 2 points?
Do no harm. Challenge the cell company supporting data, which they did not provide any cell drop, phone, call drops over a certain period of time or certain area. And for an existing residential subdivision, be extremely careful encroaching, long-term planning, new subdivisions, you can have protections for the buying public with the recorded plat maps and the dedications for these sites, and have at least some reasonable buffer. A reasonable distance is not 50 feet from an existing subdivision, but on the new planning for new subdivisions on the north side of the hill, you can have those developers include that open space area or a little bit larger of a setback. And then last thing is, if you took a 50-foot radius around the center pole of the proposed site, a 50-foot radius does not fit anywhere on that parcel. So you're giving up that 50-foot buffer to the water tower, relying upon what they say is it'll collapse upon itself, when we've seen when the failures are at the base in the rupture of that skin. So you need to protect the public.
Sir, that went over what he was asking for.
Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, may I?
Ted?
We sure have heard a lot from a lot of different sources. And I've heard the term win-win many times, and I tend to beg to differ based on the technical analysis and based on what we hear from the residents. I don't see this as a win-win situation. There's some practical issues that need to be addressed. I don't see everyone agreeing to them. If I may, I'd like to take a couple minutes and make an attempt to synthesize everything we've heard. And I boil it down to 5 issues. One is aesthetics, the view of the tower. Another one is the question or impugn the analysis from Pinnacle. The third is the impact on home values. The fourth is the impact on safety, the ability to dial 911, police, so forth. And then the fifth is this access to service. We've heard from residents and we heard from Pinnacle that we saw the maps, and we see that the service is questionable and needs improvement. So, Mr. Chair, when we deliberate on this issue, I think those are the 5 issues. The first 3, aesthetics and impugning the analysis of Pinnacle and home values, are issues that speak against the cell phone tower, and safety and service speak in favor of the cell phone tower. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I don't know, Mr. Michaelman, Mr. Chair, if you want to give the applicant one more chance to address any of the new concerns that were raised by the public, or if you're beyond that.
I am planning that, but I also have a comment of my own I want to make first. Since I'm the chair, I guess I can do it first. To be honest, I had asked a question before concerning significant gap in coverage. And I'm an engineer. I'm not dealing with the RF part, but I have a technical background. And I'm still having a challenge understanding why there is a gap in service right now. It would be nice if maybe we would have them back again, but I'm not sure we want to continue having this discussion. But the information given to me is just doesn't click that we looked at testing by handheld devices around, and like that's a good test here. And the rest of it was projected problems. You know, are we basing this upon a projection for the future, or are we basing it upon something that's occurring right now? Would the applicant like to respond to those?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The two things to look at is, like I talked about further, Verizon looks at projection of capacity utilization on how much subscribers are utilizing the existing radio channels, or once again, a finite resource. The areas that were projected for capacity issues surround where the proposed site is going. Those current utilization of the sectors around this area, they're all over 90%. The capacity is almost exhausted. We've already seen an impact to lower rates, lower quality of service, as shown by my drive test of the area and my download and upload tests, as well as the signals received. So Verizon, 4 years ago said, hey, we're going to have a problem in this area. We need to get something moving. So the utilization of the area is running 92% right now. This area shows to be exhausted, where it's going to be detrimental to the service or to the subscribers within the area in 2021. That's where this site needs to be on. It's a 2021 site. It needs to go on air. The other part of it is we showed that there is a gap in service. You had multiple people show up and say that they don't have service. They have to walk outside, and they're continually dropping calls, things of that nature. There is an impact to service. So we are running almost to 100% capacity. We are at a detriment. You do start to detriment throughput at about 80% capacity on the sectors, but they are all at 90 to 92% surrounding this area. We show that there is a lack of service, a lack of quality service within and surrounding the area. And then we show propagation maps to show what the site will do. So that is the forecast of what the site will do for coverage and helping the area, but it will also provide the capacity to help offload in those other sectors. If you remember, my best server plot shows that what the new site does, it makes those other sectors not serve in that area. The new site becomes the server and helps to cover the area. The second aspect I want to talk to is the RF safety. Every licensed wireless carrier in the United States is regulated by the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission. We follow those guidelines and standards to the letter. It's called Bulletin OET 65. This is what all wireless carriers and even police, fire, anybody who has a licensed transmitter has to follow these rules. And my engineer did the analysis and did the study to show what area out 1,500 feet would look like within it. And we did share that. That's part of your package. The fun part about it, the model didn't go out as far because the value or the levels of RF were so low from an RF safety or a absorption rate were so low that it wouldn't go out any farther. So we went out as far as we could, and we plotted that. Every wireless carrier follows this standard. It is a United States standard. It was part of the 1996 Telecommunications Act. Every carrier has to be at or below this standard. We're at the general public standard. It's less than 1% of the value of what the FCC says is the limit. The phone that everybody has either in their pocket or in their purse, because of its proximity based, it's right next to you. That's 50% of the standard. The microwave oven in your house is 5 times the standard. It's 5 times more leaky than what the phone does. What the site provides from the antennas on the tower is less than 1% of the standard. It's proximity based. Also, it's non-ionizing versus ionizing. Ionizing is gamma rays, X-rays. When you go to the dentist and you have to put the lead overcoat on because they put the X-ray machine next to you and the nurse walks out of the room, that's because it's gamma and X-rays. It's photons passing through your body. That has the ability to change DNA. Non-ionizing energy is radio antennas. The only side effect is heat. An example of that is when you talk on your phone for a long time, it gets warm. That's because that amplifier is having to, one, create the RF signal to talk back to the cell site. Two, its side effect is heat. It gets warm. Same thing with a light bulb. You have a light bulb turned on, it pops out, you go to change it quickly. What is it? It's warm because the light bulb generates heat and light. The side effect is heat. It's non-ionizing. It's going to warm up things, but it's not going to send photons through your body and change DNA. The existing tower that's right there right now with those 3 Omni whips is generating more specific absorption than what the antennas on these cell sites do. It's just the way the fact, because they're working at a lower frequency and they have a higher powered amplifier. I hope that answers your question, sir.
Steve, do you have your prop maps handy where you can show them what services currently, and then with the...
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Let me try to share that. Okay, so remember, this is the one propagation called RSRP. So this is green is in building coverage, yellow is in vehicle coverage, red is open field, and then beyond that is if you get an RF signal, you're lucky. So this is what's currently going on. This is the northeastern area, up Sharpshooter, that area, that's what's going on. And if we add the new site, we see that we start to see more RF energy going around up Sharpshooter and help provide the area coverage. The second one is best server. So remember, we talked about there's all sorts of sites surrounding the area, outside of the area, but there's not a site in the area. So all these guys send energy in and try to make connections. And we saw from the drive test what was going on. There's no real true dominant guy. They're kind of all over the place. It's luck of the draw. But if we switch and we look and let's put the new site in service, we begin to have a dominant server within that area of where the poor coverage and the quality is. So that's the best server plot. Here's before. It's all over the map. There's not a lot of great coverage, and this is down to a very low level, right? Now we've got good solid best server working in this area. Any questions?
Questions? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, does that answer your question a little bit more clearly?
That's a loaded question too, but I think it helps. Thank you.
Sure.
Does anybody wish to make a motion? We need further information.
Good. Question of staff. Could you put the last page of contains the verbiage for the motion?
Slide.
Mr. Chairman, I think we ought to bring this to a head. So with that in mind, I move to recommend approval of SUP 20-001, the special use permit to allow for a 55-foot cell tower camouflaged as a elm tree.
We have a motion. Is there a second? If there's no second to this motion, the motion dies. Do we have another motion?
Chairman, George Lee, I would like to recommend denial of SCP 20-001, special use permit to allow for a 55-foot tower camouflage as an elm tree.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second to this
Yeah.
motion?
Tom Hutchison, I second.
And Mr. Michaelman, cell tower applications are kind of unique in that there's a US Supreme Court case that suggests that the denial be supported by evidence in the record. So as you're taking individual votes, it may be very helpful for the council who's going to consider the ultimate issue. This is just a recommending body, so the public is taking a recommendation to the city council, the reasons you feel that the denial is appropriate. And they can at some point incorporate that into a denial letter if they choose to deny, or if they may overrule your denial of cell tower or approval of modifications. So that's at all possible.
Sandy, you want to make a comment, please?
Yeah, just clarification. So we are voting on the special use permits here today. So everything that we've read or received or why we would deny the cell phone tower, it's really not the cell phone tower that's in question. It's the special use permit that we're voting on for the increased height. Is that not correct?
That is correct. Right, Tammy?
Correct.
John, can I make a comment?
Sure.
Well, I got a headphone. And I thank everybody for that. I just don't think anybody will disagree that improved cell coverage is not desirable. Everybody wants it. And I think going forward, we're going to need that even more and more. I'll leave it at that. But I'm just not convinced that the applicant has demonstrated that this is the least intrusive solution. I just don't think that's happened, and clearly that's one of the major criteria for approval or denial.
Any other comments before we take a vote? Now, before we vote, and I'm going to have a roll call vote. When you vote yes, and since you're saying no to the special use permit, you vote no, you're saying yes to the special use permit. Now, is that confusing enough for everybody?
Yes.
Okay. So, Kaylee, I'd like to have you call out the roll call, and whether you're voting yes or no, please state the reason why.
Excuse me, Don, was there a second?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Ted Gambogi,
No.
And reason why, Ted, please?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I see there's 5 issues here. One is aesthetics. And I appreciate concern about the view of the elm tree. But there's another tower up there. And there's a big water tower up there, water tank up there. There's a lot of emotion associated with this proposal, and I can appreciate that. And people question the analysis given to us by Pinnacle. But I think they did an awfully good job, and it certainly helped out my analysis. There is the question of home values, and people are making estimates. But when questioned, the tax assessor's one-word answer no means he doesn't have any information or any mathematical information that documents the depreciation of home values. Those are the 3 things that people spoke about against the proposal. The remaining 2 are the ones that carried a lot of importance to me. One is there to say the inability to get a 911 call out. This is 2020, and to be in the city of Prescott and not be able to get a 911 call out is, to me, unfathomable. And then the final point is the amount of his cell phone service, and we've seen pretty good documentation that cell phone service doesn't exist. So those are the 5 things that I evaluated, and I valued safety and service over the 3 objections. Thank you.
Stan Galagowski.
Yes. And the reason is solely based off of under our general plan, where it states that anything on the property will support rather than interfere with the uses permitted outright in the zone in which it's located, which is multifamily, medium density residential. And when I look at this, when all the homeowners built their houses, when they knew that the tower was on there, the water tank was on there, they knew that it was zoned in that way. They knew the tank was there. It didn't exceed the 35-foot height limit at the time. They knew that there would probably be a special use permit if ever it was brought to them, and that's a special use permit which had to be voted on, which is occurring today. When I think of the technology advances that we've had over many, many years, shoot, I didn't have a cell phone. It's only been 12 years since I've had a cell phone. And I was serving overseas for 15 years, and I had a GPS that was bigger than a book. And now we have GPSs that are in our hands. There's nothing to say that the least intrusive means won't occur in the next 4 years that would minimize the use of a cell phone tower and get the people that don't have cell phone service down the road in a relatively short period of time. That's my reason.
Thomas Hutchison.
I vote yes for a number of reasons. Number one, when I read the description of a special use permit, it clearly says don't mess with the neighbors. Don't do no harm. Number one. Number two, I think about 1995 and where cell phones were at and what we knew about cell phones at that point. And now fast forward 25 years, and the idea that RF emissions are safe, I think needs to be challenged. I think we've learned a lot about that. So I'm not convinced that there isn't a health hazard. I don't know either way, but I think that 25 years, a lot's happened. And thirdly, as I said earlier, I'm just not convinced that the applicant has provided the least intrusive solution.
Greg Lozelle.
Yes. There's, like Tom, I've got several reasons, but I'd like to first address public safety, which I think is number one on my priority. But if there is a couple dead zones, which would be used Verizon's data there's 2 or 3 dead zones. You know, there's always an alternative, a landline, not a cable 1 line, but a landline. If you're concerned, if you've got underlying health issues, you're concerned about dialing 911. As far as cell service, if you're in your home, when I'm in my home, I'm on my Wi-Fi service. So I've got cell service through my Wi-Fi. As far as public safety themselves, there's that repeater there that fire and police can use that repeater and use old-fashioned radios, which they've been using for years. I guess my second biggest thing here was the opposition was nearly 100% of the residents in this area. And that holds a lot with me because it is in their backyard, and I get that and I appreciate that. Another of my reasons is Judd's letter, our county assessor. I mean, this is not an opinion of realtors, but this is an elected official whose job is to appraise valued property. And that is, you know, he's the top cop in that. And that holds a lot of weight with me. Second to last, I think Verizon, if they had to build 2 or 3 smaller towers, and I'm not spending their money, but if it's that valuable to them, there's other sites and all the other alternatives. And lastly, I drive down Windsor Valley Road and I see that large toilet brush on top of that hill up there that you can see all the way from Mingus Mountain to the Bradshaws. So not that that's that extreme, but I see those neighbors as I see that one tower that is a pine tree on the top of the hill. And that is why I voted yes.
Okay, George Lee.
I voted yes, and the letter that we received from our county assessor, Judge Simmons, was a very influential part of my decision. And I think during his presentation, he said that something like this would impact the way he would look at the real estate between 5 and 20%. And I think that's very, very important. The other thing that I think it needed to be done is that I don't think that there was the kind of pre-planning that should have been done by Verizon. And I think that we need to see more of that in these situations, because self-use is going to continue to increase. And these providers have to be aware of that in their pre-planning and not do what they're doing here, which is to come back in and expect all of the neighbors in this subdivision, or the vast majority of the neighbors in this subdivision, to accept their 55-foot tower. And I think that's a little bit beyond the scope of what's necessary as far as being a good neighbor. I think those are the primary issues that I have.
Butch Tracy.
I vote yes. Not everything everybody said, I agree with. I mean, there's so many points. There's points on both sides, but I was not shown the need for the extra 20 feet. That also, it said that they can increase it another 20 feet later down the road with a special use permit. That's kind of confusing to me, but I really would like to see a simple circle that showed me a 35-foot tower and a 55-foot tower. I wasn't shown that. So.
Okay, Don Michaelman.
I'm voting no. I understand, the concerns that the public has about this. Federal law, and Matt can correct me, limits what we can look at as reasons why we would deny a cell phone tower. There are 5 things that the cell phone company has to prove to us. Now, whether we agree that they did the best job in proving this to us, they did. So I would have to vote no on this. So our final result is 5 yes and 2 no. And the 5 yes means that we are denying the special, we're going to recommend denying the special use permit for this. Now, keep in mind, planning and zoning makes recommendations. We don't make the final decision. We're sort of the frontline soldier for the city council to get a lot of information to make their job harder. And so if you have interest in this, you need to attend the city council when this comes up, because that's where the final vote comes. Again, this is only a recommendation. Now, I appreciate everybody who took the time and effort to come here, to be on Zoom. The commission needs to have this input. We can't make our decisions, I think, without this input. We may not always agree, but we're still friends afterwards. So with that, I'm going to call the meeting to close. Oh, wait, excuse me, do we have any?
No, I just wanted to make a note that the goal is to get this on the November 10th city council agenda. So I just wanted to make sure we made a note of that. The goal is to get on the November 10th agenda for the city council.
Everybody hear that okay? All right, any staff updates?
No.
Then I move, we're going to have adjournment.
Yeah.